Well, good morning and welcome to the 23rd meeting of 2025 of the Economy and Fair Work Committee. Now, our first agenda item on our agenda is the choice of a convener, and this is following the resignation of Colin Smith as our convener, and in accordance with the Parliament's standing orders, where the officer of convener is vacant, the deputy convener, in this case myself, chairs the meeting for the purpose of choosing a new convener. The Parliament has agreed that only members of the Scottish Labour Party are eligible to be chosen as a convener of this committee. To that end, I would like to nominate Daniel Johnston, sitting to my right, and seek the agreement of the committee for him to be convener. Are we all agreed? Yes. In that case, I shall hand over to Daniel.
And can I thank the Deputy Convener for taking care of that so efficiently. That now leaves me to move to agenda item 2. And we have a new member with the committee this morning in Stephen Kerr. And I'd just like to invite Stephen to declare any relevant interests.
Convener, thank you, and I'm delighted to be on this committee. I should, I think, for the purposes of transparency, indicate from my register of interest things that I did before I was elected that are business related. So in addition to my professional career, in between the time that I was an MP and became an MSP, I was a paid consultant for Invicta Public Affairs, working in the marine energy sector and the wood panel industry. I was a paid consultant to the Institute of Sales Professionals. I was also a leadership consultant for an organisation called Results-Based Leadership. I was an independent assessor for the Faculty of Professional and Social Sciences at Middlesex University. And I continue, so since I've been elected, I continue to be a fellow of the Institute of Sales Professionals. So I think that's as transparent as I can possibly be. And I know it's a repetition, it's already in my register of interest, but I think for the purposes of clarity, I don't think we can go wrong by doubling down on it.
No, thank you for your thoroughness on that, and welcome to the committee. Although as much as we welcome Stephen to the committee, it's also sad to see Jamie Halcrow Johnson leave, and I'm sure all committee members would want to join with me in thanking him for his contributions and wishing him well in whichever new committee he finds himself in. Which now leaves me to move to agenda item 3. Which is about a decision on taking business in private. And the committee, I invite the committee to choose to take item 5 in private, and this will be considering our draft Stage 1 report on the Community Wealth Building Scotland Bill in private at the next meeting. Members agree to take these items in private? Good. Which now leaves us to move to agenda item 4, in which we are very pleased to have 2 panels with us this morning, looking at the tourism industry in Scotland and the upcoming introduction of the visitors levy. And in front of the committee, in the first panel, we have Mark Crothall, the Chief Executive Officer of the Scottish Tourism Alliance, Dave Hope-Jones, the Chief Executive of the South of Scotland Destination Alliance, Leon Thompson, Executive Director of UK Hospitality Scotland, and Gordon Watson, Chief Executive Officer, Loch Lomond and Trossachs National Park Authority. And I would just remind all members if they could keep their questions succinct, and I would also invite the panel to do likewise with their answers, and we'll get through as much as possible. Can I just begin by asking the panel a broad question about the health of the tourism economy in Scotland, the context that we find ourselves. And clearly we are meeting in large part as in response, and this is a committee that seeks to be responsive to circumstances in the economy in response to the letter that was drafted by a broad range of stakeholders from the tourism industry about the forthcoming visitor levy. So could I maybe begin with Mark Crothall? Could you just give your view about where we find ourselves, the tourism industry, and set out the points that were drafted in that letter that was circulated before the summer?
Convener, thank you very much and good morning everybody. As I said, Mark Crothall, Chief Executive of the Scottish Tourism Alliance, is the overarching trade body for the industry. Fortunate to have some of my members alongside us. And your question is very good, very timely, as we met with our destination forum and our council members only Monday and Tuesday of this week to get that sort of sense check, pulse check of how the industry is faring. And also our policy working group and board met last week. I think as a sort of a summary of how it's been, the first half of this year was brutal, very, very challenging for the sector. Certainly the numbers of visitors didn't flow through at the levels that we would have wanted to see. Obviously, a lot of the industry is dark in the early half of the year. But coming into Easter, things did start to thankfully pick up. But we've seen a significant decline in the domestic tourist, and Visit Scotland's statement to the committee up front, I think, highlights that as well. And obviously, that market's a hugely important market to us year-round. The American market has been much our saving grace. A lot of that market is pre-contracted, so they've come here on tour groups. Staying a little shorter, but still spending, which is great. And the response from the airports as well to sort of capitalise on trying to get routes from Canada into Scotland as a result of what's happening over the pond with the Trump announcement. So, you know, there's been, I would describe it as being relatively buoyant. Edinburgh has obviously enjoyed a very strong August period. In particular, the festivals have been fantastic. Music, live music as well. And we've seen some incredible events that have taken place across the country, which has given that stimulus, whether it's the tall ships in Aberdeen to other types of activity. Of course, a lot of good golf as well over the summer. But it's all well and good when you talk about visitor volume and footfall. It's about how much they actually spend and how that then converts into the bottom line. And the harsh reality is that the bottom line of a business today is very unhealthy in the majority of the business, particularly the hospitality sector, and I'm sure my colleague Leon will elaborate further on that. So we're in a sad position as a result of some of the announcements through the Chancellor's changes to ENICs, etc., that we've seen loss of jobs, etc. So, you know, the impact is tough, and obviously the industry has a strong ambition to invest and stay competitive, and there's only so far you can push your price up the way, which brings me on to, I guess, the industry's concerns around the visitor levy as and when and if it is chosen to be implemented by any authority. The UK is already ranked 113 out of 120 in the world in terms of its price sensitivity and competitive piece, and obviously with price points going up to combat the input costs, it does give cause for concern. We, as an organisation, fully accepted the decision in the Parliament when it was voted through, the legislation passed. We want the levy, if it is adopted, to be a force for good, but importantly, it's how it's introduced and how it's done on a timely basis. The 18-month window, which was acknowledged as being the required amount of time to be given to businesses to prepare and be compliant and legal, is absolutely critical. And our concern in the case of Edinburgh, who obviously are going to be at the forefront of this and the showcase, I guess, being looked upon across the UK and further afield, is that this implementation date of 1st of October, which is looming very fast. We do not feel that the business and the sector is fully equipped and ready, and guidance and the detail that we need to be compliant is actually in the right place. So our call is for a pushback. It's not to stop July, but it's also very much about getting it right and being the leader in that regard. And for other authorities, again, as Visit Scotland have also highlighted, the importance to look at the economic impacts and the current climate and future climate of trading and competitiveness, that analysis needs to be done in detail. And it's great that we have some authorities really delving in and pausing and engaging with us in the detail that's needed. So I'll stop there, and I'm sure it gives a flavour. But in summary, I tweeted this morning the good, the bad and the ugly. There's a lot of good that's happened.
I'm just
there's
glad
a lot
you're
of
not
bad,
referring to the
and
members of the committee.
There's
Mark.
equally a bit of ugly, and I'm not referring to you, convener. But there is some really ugly legislation out there that's causing a lot of significant damage to our bottom line. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I know that members are intending to ask about some of the detail that you've just raised. David Hope-Jones, same questions to you.
Grant, thank you very much, convener. Thank you, committee. Starting perhaps with the positives. I'm David Hope-Jones, Chief Executive of the South Scotland Destination Alliance. So we're the DMMO for the Scottish Borders, and Dumfries and Galloway, representing around 750 businesses in that region. I suppose the picture that I hope I can help paint this morning for the south of Scotland is one of collaboration and of partnership and of strategic clarity and of ambition. We've got a very strong partnership between ourselves, the DMMO, representing industry, with the two councils, with SOCI, our enterprise agency, and with Visit Scotland. And together we've developed a responsible tourism strategy with unprecedented ambition for the south of Scotland. We will, by working together, increase the value of tourism in the south of Scotland by £1 billion and support 20,000 jobs. We launched that strategy last March, and initial numbers are very positive against those very ambitious targets. The visitor economy, according to the last two STEAM reports, has grown by a third, an increase of £250 million over the last 2 years, with a 14% increase in jobs. So what we've done in the south of Scotland is we've built the collaborations, we've developed a strategy, we've invested in the relationships. We meet every week for 2 hours, those myself with the two councils, with SOCI, with Visit Scotland. We go through the detail, and every 3 months we publish a quarterly report with those 5 logos at the top to say, what have we actually done in the last quarter? What are we going to do in the next quarter? And in that way, we've, I hope, begun a journey of building business confidence and of delivering against that ambition. So I'd say we're in a strong place as far as the strategic foundations, but the honest truth is the businesses I represent are suffering exactly the same challenges that Mark so clearly articulates. Profitability is the #1 challenge for hospitality right now. It is a punishingly hard trading space. The cost of employment is too high. The cost of energy is too high. The VAT is extremely difficult for our members. And I think we are absolutely at a critical threshold on price point. And I suppose we need to recognise and respect the experts here are those people that are running the businesses, those SMEs on the ground level. They're the experts at setting price to be able to, as much as they can, pay those costs that they've got. And it is an impossibly difficult balancing act that they have. And I think where we need to be very cautious, regionally and nationally, is anything that would increase that price point beyond that critical threshold, because I think what we would see is a disproportionate drop in occupancy. I'll let others elaborate on some of the other challenges I'm sure that are there across Scotland, but I suppose that would be my opening message. We're in a very, I think, uniquely strong place in the south of Scotland, that we've got the plan, we've got business confidence, and that we're delivering on it. But we need to be honest about the challenges that our businesses are facing. And ultimately, the way you see that is the number of businesses that are for sale right now. And it's not necessarily a problem that businesses are for sale. The problem is if people aren't buying them. Because in that scenario, businesses aren't investing into themselves, and quality can, over time, go down. So those aren't challenges unique to the south of Scotland, but it's important that we have a strong and united voice from the industry to represent some of these challenges. Thank you, convener.
Thank you. And Leon Thompson, same questions.
Thank you, convener. Good morning, committee. Leon Thompson, Executive Director of UK Hospitality Scotland. Across the UK, we have 750 members operating 123,000 venues. Here in Scotland, that equates to around about 200 members and close to 10,000 venues. So we're talking hotels, bars, restaurants, coffee shops, cinemas, visitor attractions, a whole variety of indoor leisure businesses as well. Obviously, we've heard a lot already, and I think there's a lot to unpack. I think my comments, I'd really just like to highlight the fact that hospitality businesses are being completely squeezed from top to bottom at the moment. We are running our pre-budget campaign at the moment, taxed out, which is exactly how our members feel about the situation that they are in at the moment. We've talked a lot about the cost of doing business for some considerable time. The increase in the employer national insurance contributions at the budget last year was a real hammer blow for our businesses. We surveyed our members in the aftermath of that announcement, and we could clearly see that businesses were already talking about scaling back operations, cutting back on jobs and so on. And just in the last week, we saw the figures out from the Office of National Statistics talking about job losses in the economy, just over 164,000. More than half of those jobs, 89,000, have been lost in hospitality. So we've gone from being a job creator to being a sector which is now hemorrhaging jobs. We're obviously very dependent on workforce, so we are extremely disadvantaged by the changes in the employer national insurance contribution situation. It's certainly a regressive tax. Our members really feel that quite acutely, as well as job losses. It's stifling the ability of our businesses to invest as well. Now, from a tourism perspective, Scotland is an amazing destination that lots of people want to come to, but we need businesses to invest in the product and in the offer, because that's what keeps things fresh. That's what keeps visitors coming back to Scotland. And if our businesses can't make that investment, then I would argue that the proposition of visiting Scotland is weakened. So we really need to do something about that. We sort of see three key moments coming up which can be used to support hospitality. The first is obviously the UK budget. We're calling for a reduction on VAT. Now, this is a long-standing ask of the UK government. But we really feel that in order to be competitive and to give our businesses headroom, then an immediate cut in VAT down to about at least 12.5% would be the way to go. We'd like to see a reversal on the employment national insurance contributions change as well, again, so that it can help stabilise our businesses, so our businesses can get back to creating jobs right around the country and in every community. Business rate reform is in there as well, so that's in terms of the UK budget, that's for businesses in England. But beyond that, we've got an eye on the Scottish budget, and we'd like to see some meaningful support coming through from the Scottish Government on business rates in the Scottish budget at the end of this year. And then beyond that, it's about the Scottish election. And we're really calling for tourism and hospitality to have a much stronger voice at the table with the next Scottish Government. We want to see the rate system reformed so that we can actually have a better financial settlement for our businesses. And we're talking about fairness here, not necessarily a hand up. And we want to see investment in skills as well. So there's sort of three key asks that we'll be putting forward. If we can deliver on all those things, then we'll certainly see our sector fly. But at the moment, it's really difficult times out there for businesses. Mark's referred to the lack, and David as well, referred to the lack of any sort of profit or margin. I was talking to one business. They said that they've made £600 profit in the last year. Others are making nothing at all, and they're simply hemorrhaging cash. You're talking about businesses that are carrying historic debt as well. Businesses are still paying back their coronavirus business interruption loans. I mean, this is the situation that many hospitality businesses find themselves in. And a final initial point, we're obviously talking about tourism here today, and hospitality is a major part of tourism, but our businesses are also part of the every single day economy as well, and that's also what's at stake here. So whilst domestic customers continue to manage their cost of living crisis, that's obviously also having an impact on our businesses as well. So for us, it's not only about visitors coming to Scotland, it's about people who are living here as well, and the money that they have in their pockets to spend on hospitality experiences. Thank you.
And Gordon Watson, your views on the state of the tourism economy.
Okay. I'll try and inject some positivity, because I think there is some positivity to talk about, as well as the issues my colleagues have raised. So I'm Gordon Watson, Chief Executive of Lochholm and Trossachs National Park, 720 square miles of some of the finest bits of Scotland. 15,000 people live there, but we now welcome about 4.5 million people a year. So a very popular destination. The visitor economy is now worth over £500 million and supports over 7,000 jobs. And certainly in terms of visitor trends, the trends are upwards year on year. Obviously, not counting COVID, we are back to above 2019 numbers in terms of visitor numbers, and obviously within that, international visitor numbers is remaining strong, with America and Germany being the most popular countries in terms of our visitors. So certainly as a destination, it is vibrant, it is busy, the footfall is high. However, obviously I don't want to repeat everything that my colleagues have said, but we obviously engage with a destination business group that we have in the National Park, which has about 40 or so of the leading businesses up right across the sector, everything from Cameron House to self-catering, cruise operators, destinations and so on. And despite that vibrancy, obviously the sentiment is still negative because of many of the reasons my colleagues have mentioned, and I won't repeat those, but it is obviously coming down to profitability, and while turnover is positive, profitability obviously is not, and that's leading to a few outcomes. Obviously, some businesses are having to opt out of the real living wage because they feel they can't afford to pay it. Even in the summer, some businesses are unable to open some days in the week because either it's not profitable or they can't recruit enough staff. And in rural settings, recruitment is a significant issue. Housing and transport obviously being factors in that, and certainly we are very active in those areas, both as a planning authority on housing, and we are now promoting and delivering transport services that are delivering really positive outcomes for us just a couple of years into that. And fundamentally, businesses are not investing. It's kind of stagnant in terms of new products. Obviously, there is some investment. Obviously, we've seen the expansions of Cameron House and other destinations, but medium-sized businesses, family-run businesses are basically surviving. And obviously, on the visitor levy, the National Park has 4 different local authorities covering it, and obviously there could be complications in terms of different approaches in different areas. And as a National Park, we are fully engaged with each of the local authorities to try and ensure an appropriate approach. We're obviously feeding back from our destination group in terms of their concerns. If I was to sum it up, it would be scepticism that money will add value. And as a National Park Authority, we are certainly wanting to ensure that it is going to add value to the destination, and that the investment is in strategic projects and initiatives that add value to the destination. And we obviously have National Park Partnership Plan and visitor destination investment plans, which we're working on with partners, so that visitor levies are used to really support the economy directly. I'll leave it there. I won't repeat all certainly just to say that our destination group has obviously voiced some of the concerns that have been spoken about already by my colleagues.
Well, thank you for that thorough set of answers to open up. I'm going to now invite colleagues to ask questions. I think if I could suggest that if members want to direct individual questions to specific panel members so that we can get through. And with that, I'll hand to the Deputy Convener who is going to ask some questions. Michelle.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us, panel. You've given such a compelling overview of the challenges that all your businesses are facing. I don't want to labour that point anymore. But I suppose it's worth just briefly reflecting on the kind of macroeconomic picture for the UK. It could be that, you know, we're not that far away from a sovereign debt crisis, such as the scale of the challenges. So just a brief question, because I do think that you've covered your challenges very well. What, if anything, is your one biggest fear from the forthcoming UK budget, given the extensively pre-trailed talk of tax rises and so on? In other words, what would be the tipping point to really accelerate the situation you've outlined? Whoever wants to go first, just a quick off the top of your head from all of you.
Yeah, I mean, for UK hospitality and for our members, it's tax rises, further tax rises on our business. That would see more businesses going under, without a doubt. However, the other side of this is, you know, more taxes on our customers doesn't help us either. So really, any tax rise at the budget is going to be extremely problematic for a sector which depends on discretionary spend. And as our consumers have less income, then that's a problem.
Is that something all of the panel agrees with? Mark?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I think the point is of how can we stimulate the economy in terms of spend? You know, it is critical. And, you know, I think to Gordon's point earlier, that the harsh reality of us being able to compete globally on quality and investment, there's a real need to invest not just in the asset itself, but also in our people and protect the quality. So ahead, as we head towards the election, certainly we will be saying in our call to Scottish Government to see this industry as a safe bet for the future and invest in it and prioritise it, because the stimulus it brings is not only tax generation but also a lot of well-being and positive mindset and help rescue, but any further rise could see many more fall over the precipice. And to the point David made about properties for sale, absolutely true. Who would buy you know, if that is the situation?
Yeah, sure. Obviously, probably not for me as a public servant to comment on government policy, but I think if I was to reflect what the businesses in the National Park would ask for, I mean, obviously tax is an obvious one, but I think the COVID situation for tourism businesses, we kind of lived it all, and some of them are still recovering from that. And I think apart from all the nuances of tax and so on, I think just some stability and no change to let people find their feet again is probably something businesses would ask for, because it's just been coping with COVID, coming out with COVID, and then various other things to address. And so I think, you know, when you're thinking about family businesses, people who've invested their lives in businesses and obviously in the place as well, and they're very tied into the destination, just seeing a bit of space to just plan and to see a way out. So I think there's an emotional side to this for a lot of businesses who are very much part of their communities and invested in a place as well as a business.
Any final comments, David?
Thanks very much. Yeah, I mean, at its bluntest, any policy act that increases the costs for business and reduces the amount of money in the pockets of customers is going to have a disproportionately negative impact. Those are the practical points, and I absolutely agree, Gordon. I echo the emotional points as well. There are a great many businesses, especially small, medium businesses, that feel really got at this time, feel really targeted, unfairly targeted, and they feel that they're investing in the assets that make communities work, the local pub, the restaurant with rooms, the places that bring people together. And I think they feel undervalued by government. And I think it's really important that we're honest about what those challenges are. Thank you.
Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, Michelle. Myrtle Fraser.
Thank you, Convener. Good morning to the panel. I've got some questions I want to follow up on the visitor levy specifically, but maybe I can start off with a slightly broader question. We've had a very busy summer in Edinburgh. I think in Edinburgh, at one point, Edinburgh was the most expensive destination in the world, with the confluence of the festival and the Oasis concerts at the weekend. So we have a lot of conversations around what people call over-tourism. I don't represent Edinburgh, I represent Mid-Scotland and Fife. I represent Perth and Kinross, Clackmannan, Stirling and Fife. People in my area get very annoyed when they hear the term over-tourism because they say, we don't need less tourists, we need more tourists. And the only place in the region I represent where I ever hear any concerns about visitor numbers being too large is in St Andrews at the height of the summer. Everybody else is saying, give us more visitors. So I suppose my first question, maybe I can start with David, because you represent the south of Scotland and you'll have an interest in this. Do you think there's a danger of our debate around tourism getting skewed by the fact that people look at, for example, Edinburgh or other hotspots like Skye, and they think everything's tremendous, whereas the rest of the country really could do with a lot more visitors?
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. I mean, I think a huge challenge in the conversation around visitor levy is people chirping up with, well, I went to Venice and it was a few extra pounds and I still would go to Venice. And of course you would. And it would be the same with Barcelona, and perhaps it would be the same with Edinburgh. But I represent a rural and in places remote destination. And it's a very, very different context. I recognise and respect Galloway has been through a difficult and divisive national park consultation. And I recognise in that there are some people that said we have over-tourism here. I disagree with that. I suppose the key points that I would make is, again, we're in a strong place in the south of Scotland because we have a plan, and it is a responsible tourism plan, not with targets about visitor numbers, but visitor spend, about job creation and about community prosperity. And I think that's really, really important, to recognise and respect that communities everywhere can and do have reservations about potential growth in visitor numbers. And the narrative we need to be developing is one of the visitor economy. We need to talk about the economic benefits and how they are socially felt in communities up and down the country. But absolutely, as far as the visitor levy is concerned, it's really important to be honest that yes, there are a great many European countries that have gone for it, but I mapped out yesterday the VAT rates of the 18 European countries that have, and I make it an average VAT on accommodation of 9.6%. That's half of what we have. The businesses I represent, I think, would be very happy to have a visitor levy if they paid VAT at 10%. It's important that we're honest about where Scotland sits in terms of VAT compared to other comparable countries in Europe. And it's important, exactly as your question alludes, that we're honest that different parts of Scotland are very different. Yeah. We're extremely lucky to have a regional enterprise agency, SOSI, with whom we work very closely and are funded and supported by. And I think the development of SOSI has helped begin to change that paradigm as far as the understanding and policy making solely be based around the sort of central belt and the specific challenges that are there. And I'm really encouraged the fact that I'm here and on this panel and able to speak about the south of Scotland and represent exactly the sort of rural constituencies that you are talking about. So yes, it is a very different context within Scotland, and Scotland is very significantly different to many countries that have embraced the levy. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Mark?
Thanks, Murdo. I also have the privilege of co-chairing Scotland's Tourism and Hospitality Industry Leadership Group with Minister Lockhead. And my colleague Leon also sits on that group. And we're the group that's responsible for Scotland's National Tourism Strategy, Scotland Outlook 2030. And we have an aspiration for Scotland to be world leaders in 21st century tourism. And I would still very much say to all of you that aspiration within the sector very much stands strong. We are an aspirational group of people. We want Scotland to really sort of be recognised globally as being, world leaders in what we do. And we have some iconic events that take place, and we have great destinations. But one of the other areas of that strategy is exactly to your point about how do we spread the tourism pound, because we know that there isn't over-tourism everywhere. There are very strong pinch points in the cities at certain times. Here in Edinburgh, of course, when you have a volume of visitor coming this way, it's challenging, and we would have to respect the community that lives in the city. On Skye, I have many Skye colleagues who will tell you that Skye isn't suffering from over-tourism, but yes, at the ferry pools, Glenfinnan Viaduct last week, as we saw the Deputy First Minister there are challenges when it gets very busy. So from a levy intention, if it were to be raised, it's about how that money is then targeted to address that and attract more tourists in, because one of the real calls for the levy from within the sector is also to help fund and support the destination marketing organisations that do the great work that they do. And I would refer to Aberdeen, for example. The levy that they've announced at 7% sounds a terrible number psychologically, but actually much of that money is really being wanted so they can target, and Visit Aberdeenshire can use that to market more people in. Just to the Venice point, the levy is used in those certain destinations, yes, to address pressure tourism, over-tourism. And we've seen it has had a positive impact in Venice with a significant decline in visitor number. We're not here to talk about a levy trying to quash numbers. It's about growing, and it's how it's then used.
Okay, it's very interesting you use that example of Venice, there's reduced numbers. Just to give you an anecdote that puts it into context, so Perth and Kinross, which is part of the area I represent, have a live consultation on a visitor levy in that area, and I've had a lot of engagement with local businesses around that. The way that is framed is very much around this could raise £9 million for the council to spend on things that will benefit tourists and benefit the local economy. As it's framed in that way, it seems like a great thing. Why would you oppose it? What I haven't seen, and maybe any of you can enlighten me on this, is has there been any study done as to what the negative impact of a visitor levy would be in terms of visitor numbers? Are you aware of any work that's been done about the economics around that? I mean,
yeah,
well, Mark,
it's a very well framed question, and actually, again, it draws on to the points that Visit Scotland made about the local authorities need to consider the potential impacts of price increases around competitiveness, quality, and commission, that type of work. And I know, speaking with Vicky Miller, there is a thought about halfway through our strategy we need to be doing the same. Malcolm MacLeod, who I know is on the panel next, Highland Council have actually just appointed an independent consultant to do that assessment. We were speaking with Gillian Schofield yesterday from Stirling, and they are about to do the same. So I think there is a recognition that that needs to be done before we jump into what seems like a good idea. And actually, we're all very appreciative of the fact that, the local authority purse is very challenged, but it goes back to our point around if you create the right conditions for the sector and allow them to breathe, which is some of my colleagues have said when we've asked, to really drive the economic growth, then the benefit will come back the other way for enhancement.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, Gordon, yes.
Yeah, thanks. I was just back to your point about over-tourism. I suppose I would characterise it not as over-tourism, but a historic underinvestment in public infrastructure for tourism. I think, I'm obviously talking in a rural setting, and obviously as a National Park Authority, it's something we've been focused on since day one, is investing in the right visitor infrastructure and the right visitor management approach as well. I think COVID was a wake-up call because of what happened, and lots of people coming into the countryside and rediscovering their country, which was hugely positive in many respects, but also shone a light on the fact that our infrastructure was not what it should be. And there's obviously been lots of positive things happen as a result of that. Certainly, we have much stronger collaboration with partners in the national park. We've seen RTIF develop and be more strategic in how investments are happening in physical infrastructure. One thing that happened during COVID was the Better Places funding, which allowed communities and organisations to hire seasonal staff at destinations to help interact with visitors. And it was a hugely positive, preventative, small amounts of money with huge preventative impact. And I can't understate the value of rangers and people on the ground to support visitor experiences and to prevent issues deteriorating into some of the things we've seen in rural areas. So I think I think all of that is going in the direction and the fact that for visitor levy purposes, councils have to have a strategy around how they'll spend it is another layer of let's get more proactive about how we're planning our tourism product. And that's our mantra, and obviously we try and support others in sharing our experiences on that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, can I bring in Leon on the same point, but maybe also just move on a little bit as well, if you can cover this point, Leon, because you've shared with the committee, Mark, some of the correspondence the STA have had with Ivan McKee and the Scottish Government around the benefits of changing the model of visitor levy from a percentage to a flat fee. And I wonder if you could explain a little bit around the rationale for that and why you think that's important.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, we've always argued that the percentage model is just much more challenging for businesses to manage, and it's not just about working out the percentage on the accommodation cost, although that does have its issues. But the way that bookings are handled these days through third parties, through OTAs, so Booking.com, Expedia and so on, or through the wholesale market, so tour businesses and so on, often hotels are selling on the rooms to those third parties. They then don't know what the accommodation cost is that the guest has actually paid, and that's just a feature of the model that's there. So that means that technically businesses, accommodation businesses, could be in breach of the legislation if they're not charging the levy accordingly on that. And that's why the government's introducing an SSI in order to address that particular point, so that accommodation businesses will be able to charge the levy based on the first sale price, which will make things simpler for businesses. I think there's also an issue about what looks sort of fair and reasonable as a charge as well, and obviously a percentage starts to get quite hefty quite quickly, whereas a flat rate is perhaps just easier and more transparent for customers to see as well. So that's the nub of the issue in there, but it brings significant challenges. And I mean, for members of the committee, when you've travelled abroad, you'll know you go abroad and you pay a flat rate. It's it's much simpler for people to manage that from a customer and also from a business perspective as well. So that's critical. I mean, to pick up on the point around over-tourism, I don't believe we have over-tourism in Scotland, and even Edinburgh isn't experiencing over-tourism. We're not Barcelona, we're not Amsterdam, we're not Venice. We have a month or 6-week period in the summer where things are pretty busy, but a lot of that is also generated by people who live in Edinburgh going out and about and enjoying the Fringe, the Edinburgh Festival and so on as well. So it's not actually just about visitors to the city, it's actually about the citizens of the city going out and enjoying what's on their doorstep. So that adds to the sense of busyness. To Gordon's point, yes, we need to see more investment going into the management and into facilities and so on, and that's certainly welcomed by my members, my accommodation members, who will be tasked with charging and then raising the money and then remitting that money across to the local authority. But we do need to be careful that what we see is not just money being pulled out of the visitor economy and just being given to the local authorities instead. And what I mean by that is, if people come and they pay a 5% levy on their accommodation, then maybe they spend less in the businesses in the city as a result in order to manage their budgets while they're here. So 50 million into City of Edinburgh Council, for example, if we then lose a large chunk of that because that's not being spent in businesses, then who's actually winning? This starts to just look like an exercise in taxing, raising money, and then there's all the administrative costs and so on as well. Another point I want to make is that whilst this is a charge on visitors, accommodation businesses will have their own costs in administrating this, and it's very welcome that City of Edinburgh Council and other councils have recognised that. But the 2%, which has going to be retained by businesses won't cover all the costs associated with managing this. You know, changing systems, administration, time, all of those come at a cost to business. So in a sense, you know, this will be money out of businesses, tens of thousands of pounds each year for some of the larger hotel operators as a result of administering the charge.
Okay. I believe Gordon MacDonald's wanted to make a brief supplementary.
Thanks very much, Convener. I've got a very short supplementary to Leon. I've travelled all over the world, and there is at least 27 countries in the world that has visitor charges of some description. Some of them are flat fare, some of them are percentages. So what I don't understand is Booking.com, Hotel, all the rest of the booking platforms already handle this percentage change. And it's usually referred to pay local tax at hotel or wherever it happens to be. So when you book in, the hotel knows what your rate is that you book through Booking.com or Hotel.com. And therefore, at the end of the stay, they apply that percentage at that point. The software already exists. Many of the hotels that are in the Edinburgh area, and I can only talk about Edinburgh, are international hotels that use this software all over. So I'm struggling to understand how large hotel groups will struggle to implement this charge. There might be an individual small family-owned hotel that might have problems, but the vast majority of the presence in the city of Edinburgh will be covered by their international software packages that they use in every other country across the world. The second thing, you referred to that hoteliers will only get 2% of the fee. It's actually 40%. It's a 5% levy, of which 2% of the 5% is retained by the hotelier. So actually there's quite a substantial amount of money that will go back into the hotelier's pocket to help with the administration. Have I missed something?
Well, my members don't see it that way. They don't think that they're going to be able to cover their costs, or for it to come anywhere close to covering the costs that they're facing. In terms of international comparisons, one of the issues we have here is that we also have price marking legislation in the UK as well, which means that the price has to be sort of fully displayed for consumers. So it's not a case of booking and then paying at the property. Everything's going to have to be paid for up front. So that's slightly different to other countries and other territories, and that is part of the challenge. We also have an issue around VAT being applied to the charge as well, which is another issue in there, which adds to the complication in the calculation.
Mark, do you have anything?
Yeah, I was just going to say what Leon has referred to. It's the Digital Markets Competition Act that we obviously have is a differential here in the UK, and that does provide complexity. I mean, it's the large and the small. I was speaking to the finance director of the Gleneagles Hotel Group yesterday. Again, confused and challenged by what this might mean for the townhouse here in Edinburgh and how it might then unfold in Perth. Other independent operators amiss because there is no technical detail that's been provided as yet in Edinburgh for something that needs to be in place by the 1st of October. So there are concerns. There's often been comparison to Manchester and Liverpool, and in the UK. That is a completely different scheme. It's run by a bid. It's run by the hotel sector. It's a flat fee, single price, voluntary, only targeted to leisure visitors in Manchester, and in Liverpool it's £1. In Liverpool it's £2. Wales have voted for a flat fee of £1.75. There is no issue, no concerns being raised by anybody in the industry around something that is very straightforward and easy to administer. And in the eyes of the consumer, £4, £5, whatever that flat fee might be, can still be determined by a local authority, but it becomes much more transparent, and all of the challenges that we currently find we're having to grapple with would be removed if a flat fee option or if a flat fee approach would be taken, and obviously that spend would come the other way. So we never saw this coming right the way through the process. In all of our really positive engagement with Tom Arthur, we have always advocated for a flat fee for a lot of reasons that we've cited, and other reasons that have since surfaced that none of us perhaps knew as well.
Thank you.
Gordon, were you wanting
Sorry, it was just a little wee supplementary in the back of what Mark
Well,
said.
as long as this one's we, Gordon.
Well, it will be. It will be. I've just had a quick look at Edinburgh for October, so it's not the height of season, right? Comparing 3-star and 5-star hotels in October, it ranges from £160 to £370. A 5% charge is £8 or rising to £18. Are we honestly saying that somebody that's prepared to pay £370 for a room in Edinburgh is going to walk away because they've been asked for an extra £18 in local tax?
I think the point here is competitiveness. And obviously it wouldn't apply in terms of actually it's only on the rates from July of next year. The businesses have to be able to administer from the 1st of October. You know, it goes back to we need to invest. We want that secondary spend in all of our pubs and restaurants that are absolutely desperate to survive, visitor attractions as well. You know, an example here up in the Highlands, you know, in Wick, we've got a situation where a guest come in and they share a glass of wine now. They're sharing a bowl of soup because the visitor spend is actually being really compromised by all sorts of other things that we know. Had they not, or if they don't have to pay that level, then of course maybe they might have 2 glasses of wine and not have to share. And that is the benefit of the business. It allows investment, creates employment. Nobody is immune to this employment challenge we're facing. Even our own organisation are seeing members actually. I've had to make a redundancy in my own organisation as a result of the financial impacts that are being faced. But your point is there will be those that won't bat an eyelid at paying an extra. But the majority are beginning to sort of raise their eyebrows. And the travel trade are also telling us that they are now looking at taking business away from Scotland because it's more difficult to sell.
Thank you. Murdo, are you...
Yeah, I think I'm through.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Stephen.
It was mentioned in the briefing that in terms of cost competitiveness, we are 113th out of 119. You specifically, Mark, mentioned that was a UK number. How does that relate to Scotland?
Sorry, thank you. It's based across the VAT measures primarily, so tax measures. So the drill down into Scotland I don't have, I'm afraid. But when you're looking at air passenger duty, VAT, and the taxation on a visitor, that's what that statistic relates to.
Are there aspects of tourism and hospitality in Scotland that are making us less competitive than, say, regions of England?
In terms of performance,
product and performance, the whole.
Yeah, I mean, it's you know, we're hearing from colleagues, you know, in our industry leadership group, and I mean Rob Dixon, who's here today, you know, again was elsewhere in the UK, further south with family and others, and we know from colleagues that the pressure on the domestic market is just as great because they're seeing outbound growth, they're seeing much more appealing and attractive price points, and obviously we've got the other sort of opening up of the Balkan states as well. So Cornwall, Devon, all these areas where they have traditionally been hotspots are suffering the same sort of demise of the UK market. So definitely.
So we've had quite a discussion, and you've given a fantastic overview, compelling, I think Michelle Thompson called it, and I agree with her. And we've focused in on a number of issues that are reserved, such as VAT rates, employer national insurance, and so forth. But obviously, we're a committee of the Scottish Parliament, so I'm particularly keen to hear, in nuts and bolts terms, what it is that the Scottish Government needs to do. And I'd like you to address this, if you would. Now, I suppose I'm directing my questions really at Mark, David and Leon, but probably specifically Mark and Leon. What are the things that the Scottish Government need to stop doing, start doing, and continue doing? And when you address that, Leon, you mentioned investment in skills, so I'd like you to specifically talk about that, if you would. I'll go back to Mark to start with.
Thank you. Well, obviously, business rates relief is the one thing that hasn't been mirrored like for like in the Scottish Government's position or the budget last year. We've seen, obviously, a benefit of the small business bonus scheme going out. However, again, the breathing space that our businesses have, of any business over that threshold of 51 rateable value has not had any relief whatsoever. So we'd certainly, if the Chancellor is going to extend some form of reliefs in the upcoming budget, we would like to see those mirrored directly, specifically into the licensed sector as well, where the harm is felt most. Skills, absolutely yes. I think, you know, that's, I'll let Leon there, but we do have an amazing amount of industry-led initiatives and raising money to support and upskill our own colleagues. We're at an event on Friday where there will be at least another £60,000 collected from industry colleagues to support investment in their own people. The other piece is about regulation. I mean, we can't have any more load onto a business that would incur more cost and more investment required to be able to trade. And I think the upside and the flip side of that is actually do more and invest more into Visit Scotland. Don't take anything away. We were extremely grateful for the fact that we saw that extra monies given to really go out and aggressively market into the domestic market to try and restore some of that. So don't slice the pie, back the industry and actually replicate what we would see coming through from UK initiatives, but not put tax up.
Can I ask you to say a bit more about regulation? So you're effectively asking the Scottish Government to cut regulation. Or are you saying no more regulation? Which is it?
We certainly don't need any more on top. We would like planning to be improved so we can actually make that and provide some form of accelerant to enable investment where it is possible to happen quickly. And if there were some form of relief, etc., that would be given to that. So it's back the winners, you know, and really sort of also provide, and I referred to earlier, the destination management organisations, you know, critically important to manage some of what might be referred to as over-tourism or the pressure in these destinations. Now, they've been supported through the enterprise agencies in the past and through means of membership raising monies, etc. So to supplement what Visit Scotland do in terms of local marketing activity, but as Gordon does so well at the National Park, being able to manage what's on the ground in a responsible way and get the best out of and deliver the best experience is key. And at the moment, that community of destination management organisations are all pretty much on a knife edge, waiting on a levy, which may or may not come.
Yeah. Setting aside the issues, I think we've covered that. Is there anything else the government should stop, start or continue?
Continue to talk about or start talking about tourism more positively. I know we have messages and we've got lots of advocates, but you know they need to understand the balance sheets of our business, and I think getting more under the skin of what it actually takes to run a business. And you know we've had some really great engagement with the Deputy First Minister, and obviously Minister Lockhead sits around our co-chairs the industry leadership group with us. But it's great when we see lots of people on the ground. But I really don't think they truly appreciate actually how much the margin is now compromised. So freeing that up, the nighttime economy is another area of our sector which is hugely important, real opportunity for growth. And actually, if that falls over, then you know there's a challenge. And in the public sector reform space, you know, obviously there's monies there that could be saved, I'm sure, but getting more people back into offices and spending through the daytime economy, as Leon referred to earlier, would be very welcome as well.
Thank you for that. I think I'll go to Leon. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Well, the main financial lever that the Scottish Government has is business rates, as Mark has mentioned. It's reform of business rates is something we've talked about at this committee a number of times. Is something we're keen to see happen. I mean, currently our hospitality businesses in Scotland are paying more than on business rates than their equivalents are in England, just due to rateable values being higher here than elsewhere in the UK. So that's a challenge in terms of attracting investment, and then businesses having additional money to spend on other things, whether that's employment or investment here. The UK government at the moment is looking at reform of business rates there as well, which would essentially see variable multipliers, what we would call the poundage rate, being introduced, which could be very advantageous for hospitality businesses in England. If there was a multiplier of sort of 35 pence in the pound, for example, that would really kind of change things for hospitality businesses in England. Well, it was discussed with the Cabinet Secretary for Finance, Deputy First Minister and the Minister for Public Finance, but it was ruled out because the economic model in Scotland is such that it just wouldn't work. But the conversation was sort of rather closed down with the announcement about reviewing the methodology that is used for hospitality, which, fine, open to having that conversation, but a review group is to be set up. Currently, I'm not aware that there's even a chair been appointed for that review group. It's got a long reporting period to the end of 2026, and then any recommendations may be adopted at the next revaluation in 2029. So, I mean, we've talked today about a sector that really needs support sooner rather than much later. So that's really the kind of key ask of some kind of support at the next Scottish budget, but reform in the lifetime of certainly in the lifetime of the next Parliament. We've obviously spoken before about skills. We've talked before about apprenticeship levy, so I'll start there. It's very much an imperfect situation. Our members don't like it because it denies them the sort of flexibility in terms of accessing training and so on. Again, this really only applies to our members who are operating in England and Wales, because the money that comes to the Scottish Government from the levy that's charged on our businesses here isn't identified. So the Scottish Government says it doesn't know how much money it receives from the UK Government that is actually that apprenticeship levy fund. Sort of linking with that, there was one fund that our businesses did make very good use of, and that was the Flexible Workforce Development Fund. And when that was wound up, I think sort of a couple of years ago now, that really sort of turned off a training and skills opportunity that.
So what specifically would you like to see happen then?
Well, it would be a couple of things. So it would be good to see the Flexible Workforce Development Fund reinstated, because, as I say, our businesses did make great use of that. We as an organisation are working with the UK Government and DWP to provide what we call sector-based work academy programmes. So this is actually about encouraging people who are currently on unemployment benefits to undertake training at their local college in hospitality. Participants go to the local college for a couple of weeks. They learn and develop hospitality skills. They get some interaction with local employers as well. And then after that 2-week period, they then have a week of working in a local hospitality business as well. And at the end of that process, they're guaranteed a job interview, not necessarily a job, but they're guaranteed the job interview. And that is up and running after some very successful pilots that we ran with DWP in England. Because of the way the devolution money flows to Scotland, because this is direct money coming straight out of Whitehall for this, that money is not ring-fenced or provided to Scotland in that way. So we're very keen to see that initiative replicated here in Scotland, because we think that it's beneficial to our businesses, because even though we're facing challenges around recruitment at the moment and costs, we do need to keep the pipeline of talent moving through and keep people, particularly young people, interested in jobs in hospitality. But we also see that there's great opportunities there for governments to lower the welfare bill, because we can actually help get people into work, through these kinds of training programmes. So we'd like to see, Scottish Government really sort of looking seriously at something like that, which would help our industry, would help in terms of getting more people to employment. So to me, it looks like a win-win, where we can actually sort of, help deliver against broader policy objectives of the Scottish Government. And obviously, we're doing that already in terms of the UK Government.
So clarity around the levy, the amount,
yeah,
and how it's being spent, and then some imaginative use of that money to generate that pipeline you're talking about. Yes,
would you mind if I responded to that one as well? I suppose as a public body, a few asks would be to keep the Rural Tourism Infrastructure Fund going. That is now enabling really powerful strategic interventions in terms of fit-for-purpose public visitor infrastructure. We are benefiting from it in the national park. We've just completed a site at Tarbert, which has enabled us to repurpose it for camper vans, rapid chargers for EVs, active travel. So even in existing sites, changing investing to respond to changing visitor needs and to enable the sustainable tourism that we want is really key. So I think it's important that keeps going. I mentioned earlier the Better Places funding that was available for a few years, and to highlight that not only allowed seasonal staff to be employed in hotspots, but it actually engaged communities and businesses in their own visitor management solutions. It enabled collaboration because communities had the means to actually take ownership of their own destination through being able to employ staff and be able to do small investments. So something like that in the future, I think, is important in rural settings. And finally, again, trying to, there's a lot of positivity around growth areas and particularly people wanting to come and enjoy an outdoor experience. The growth in terms of more people being active in the outdoors, so not only good for the economy, but good for the well-being of our people. An example would be Conic Hill, one of our popular small hills. Going back a few years, it was maybe about 90,000 people. It's now about 230,000 people are going up that every year, and we're having to spend a lot of money on the path, but that's a good problem to have. So the appetite to have an outdoor experience, but also the appetite to want to do it sustainably, means transport is a key thing for our rural economy, particularly where in some places over-tourism, it's not about too many people, it's about too many cars. And certainly our piloting of rural seasonal transport services, the Trossachs Explorer, has really caught the imagination, not just for the visitor, but it means seasonal staff can get to work, reconnecting communities. People who don't own a car are able to access the outdoors. And it's what we refer to as unlocking money from the car. If people are travelling in their own itinerary, not in a car, they're going to spend more money because they're not staying in a camper van, or they're actually going to depend on the business where I want to stop for lunch, the business where so being able to provide an alternative to just car-based tourism is really important as well, and it will also support some of the visitor management challenges we have in some of our, small number of hotspots as well, and that's something we are very committed to, and also from a net zero point of view in terms of reducing car journeys from an emissions point of view as well.
Thank you. And David.
Great, thank you very much. Echo points around no new regulation around business rates parity south of the border, and RTIF, particularly from our perspective, keen that RTIF is open to, accessible to, welcoming to other areas of Scotland, that it is not just seen as a sticky tape solution where there's an issue, but it can look at prevention as well. In the south of Scotland, we have an ambitious plan that we are delivering on, and we're growing our visitor economy in a very, very positive way. And we're keen, where there's state-funded opportunities like that, that we're able to get the visitor management right before there's a problem. And my worry sometimes with RTIF is there's a sense of, look at the visitor numbers, this isn't the top problem. Workforce, absolutely echo some of those points. It's really important for us in the south of Scotland, for a host of regions, not least, we've got this fantastic prospective investment of Centre Parks, building their first holiday village in Scotland, in the Scottish borders near Hawick. That's going to bring in £400 million worth of investment and create 1,200 jobs, which is game-changing for towns like Hawick and Jedburgh and Galashiels and Selkirk. Towns that lost their mills will be transformed, but only if we get the workforce and skills right. Otherwise, they will be bussed in from other areas, potentially across the border. Now is the time to invest in workforce development. There's a lot of money and a lot of organisations.
David, what does that actually mean?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of money and there's a lot of organisations doing things. We've done a really detailed analysis of what are the existing workforce challenges for businesses in the south of Scotland. And if I may, Convener, I'll send across to the committee the detailed analysis here. In short, the challenges are we're not selling the industry right. We're not attracting young people with the right soft skills, and there are certain hard skills, particularly around chefs, that we need to invest in. We're presenting at the ILG in a couple of weeks, and there's a real enthusiasm for working together. But we need to make sure that there's investment in this space. I think sometimes, for very understandable and admirable reasons, a lot of the investment goes following the sort of no one left behind agenda and trying to reach the hardest to reach, which is hugely important. But in reality, it doesn't necessarily reach as many people as you need to. I think that's a challenge, and a lack of industry engagement earlier in the process of some of these interventions. Those would be my key messages. If I may, the really key point that I'd be keen to make is on what Mark said around the destination management, the funding for those organisations that are doing the doing at a local level. The South of Scotland is a uniquely positive case study of business working with the public sector. We've dialed up the ambition and we're delivering on it. But we need to keep that drive going. I always enjoy putting a new word into the official record of the Scottish Parliament, so let me have a crack at this. Souffléism. That's my risk that I register here. The danger that we've created this wonderful thing in the south of Scotland. We've got a vision, we've got a passion, we've got an ambition, we are delivering on it. But let's be real, a strategy on its own achieves nothing unless there's the resource and the capacity and the drive and the determination to make it happen. And that's what we need in the south of Scotland. We need to not take our foot off the pedal. We need to invest in destination management. And my worry looking forwards is that we begin to think we've said it will happen, the results are encouraging, and hence it will continue to deliver. We need to keep putting gas in the tank. Final point, if I may, infrastructure. I think you were looking for tangible things. On Saturday, we're going to celebrate 10 years since Queen Elizabeth II travelled from Waverley Station to Tweedbank and opened the Borders Railway. What a project. What that tells, not just about the south of Scotland, but about Scotland as a whole, as a place that's thinking differently, that's acting differently, and that is open for business. It has transformed businesses in the south of Scotland. Let's not just celebrate the decisions that were made 15 years ago that have got us now. Let's look forwards. Let's continue that line to Hoyt. Connect up with that £400 million investment from Centre Parks. That's larger, by the way, than the total cost of the railway to Tweedbank. Let's continue on to Carlisle, and let's build the third cross-border railway. If you wanted something neat to take into manifestos, that would be my suggestion. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much for that injection of enthusiasm. Can I just ask a brief supplementary based on the last set of questions, which have been largely about matters of competitiveness and price sensitivity? To some extent, this is a policy that has been based on the assumption that a price can be added on and that customers will pay it. The question is, to what extent are tourism businesses price setters, or to what extent are they price takers of a price set by the market? This is, in the formal parlance, about the elasticity of demand. And to some extent, it will be neither one thing nor the other. It will be somewhere in between. But what extent can tourist businesses set a price, or to what extent do they have to accept the price that the market sets and tourists are willing to pay? Mark, I think you were really the one that has been discussing this.
It's a very good question, and I think it's becoming more and more challenging because of the input costs that the businesses are having to combat in terms of where their price point needs to sit to just stay afloat or pay a bill that's needed to be. I think, don't get me wrong, I would agree, and I think we'd all agree, there are certain price points that exist around the country in different types of accommodation, in certain experiences that are quite rich, and maybe there is some of those people who operate those businesses, or the owners of those businesses, are expecting a higher return, and therefore that is a difficult one to manage. Dynamic pricing is an interesting model, but there are, as I say, tipping points, and I think the harsh reality of what that pricing is becoming more and more clear to operators at all level and business owners at all level. We don't want the reputation, we don't want the badge that Edinburgh already has, because it was publicly put in the media a couple of months ago, of being the most expensive short-stay destination in Europe. So, that itself is bad. Now, owners, operators, everybody else have to come in line, But you can only do that if you can actually pay the bill and meet the costs that your overheads, your energy, your insurance, your labour, the food inflation. Obviously, all of these costs continue to rise, and the customer themselves are expecting an upweighted level of quality. And, you know, they're benchmarking us against destinations who have really upped their game as well. So it's a very, very fine line of how you set price. So are we price setters, or are we actually driven by market demand? Clearly, you'll look at Oasis and you'll look at those iconic moments that, you know, as a destination, we should be very proud to be able to be looked upon as hosting. And, you know, we'll have other events, Commonwealth Games next year in Glasgow. Yeah, they will no doubt drive rate through demand. And it's not something that's unique to Edinburgh or Glasgow or Scotland. It happens around the globe.
I feel compelled at this point to say that we appreciate both Oasis and Oasis fans in this committee.
170 million.
Can I just also ask the question? I mean, I think it's always worth, when policies are introduced, to take a deep breath, take a couple of steps back and ask, are we where we expected to be? And particularly, I think when this was first mooted, people were talking about £1 or £2 on a hotel visit. If you're looking at 7% and then you add VAT, that's effectively a 10% on top. If we, you know, let's say we manage to find a hotel room for £150 in Edinburgh, you know, that's putting another £15 on top of that bill. Is that sort of 10% additional charge to the guest what was expected when this was first discussed?
It's, in my view, and having had conversations with yourself and many of your colleagues, you know, when this was going, the bill was going through Parliament, I think we all, you know, at the early stage thought we would be in that £2 to £3, £4 market. Yes, in the city centre, Edinburgh capital, possibly more. Certainly speaking to chief executives and officials in many of the local authorities as well, who are actually considering this, they have also modelled originally or thought around £1, £2. Again, Malcolm MacLeod won't mind me saying that, because I think that's on record as well publicly. So we are not where we thought we would be, as a simple answer. We are now far up the ladder by way of an increase, and I guess the move of the local authorities, who are obviously having to manage their finances in a very finite way and see the opportunities, or presenting those opportunities of what could be done if, but without doing that economic impact assessment first, is a very risky thing to do. I am off. I haven't had a holiday yet. I've been spent a lot of time around Scotland, enjoying Scotland for all that it is, and the events and things have been phenomenal over the summer, and we have a lot to shout about. But I'm away for a week in Menorca with my wife, and I've got my tourist tax bill, because I've got it communicated to me. It's £54 for the week in a property that I won't say is a 1-star, 2-star property. It's a very nice place to go, but £54 is all I'm being asked to pay, and I don't mind paying that. But I would be a bit sort of hairs on my back if I'm being asked to pay, you know, £154, £200 plus to stay in a similar type property, which is what it would be in Scotland.
Thank you. I'd now like to bring in Willie Coffey.
Thanks, Convener. Good morning, everybody. I just wanted to drill in a little bit about whether the cost of a holiday in Scotland is fair, and you've kind of touched on it there, Mark, with the comments that you've made there. But by and large, we're seeing that international numbers are going up, and I expect they'll go up even more in 2025. But the briefing we have here tells us the average trip duration fell by 19%. That's maybe a day out of 5 people are staying for a shorter period of time. Is there an issue there about the cost of booking and paying for a holiday in Scotland? Mark, maybe start with you.
Thank you, Willie. And listen, Scotland, we have outperformed the rest of the UK. I mean, we should be celebrating that in terms of our international footfall numbers. We've got a 26% growth on visitor numbers since 2019 and in visitor spend. So we have done an amazing job, and all credit to Visit Scotland and the industry. And I think our strength in that is because we work collaboratively together. But you're right, the visitor stay is actually shortening. And yes, international markets are also being price sensitive. And I can say that my chair is Rebecca Brooks, who owns Abbey UK, chair of UK Inbound, which is the organisation that represents the inbound tour operators. And many of their members are beginning to say, more and more so now, there is a price sensitivity, not just to Scotland, but to the UK as a whole. So, you know, the market, tourism the global tourism is bigger than it's ever has been, even post-COVID. So there's more people travelling than ever before. And there's a tougher market out there, but our price point is now becoming against the quality of the offer, and not everywhere, and that's the total experience, is uncomfortable. And I think we are, having spoken to the board of Internova, who are the owners of Barhead Travel and own one of the largest American travel companies, have a whole suite of travel companies. They raised their eyebrows at the fact that we were actually thinking about putting a visitor levy of a percentage of 5% into Edinburgh. £3, £4, £5 possibly it would be palatable, and I think if we can demonstrate and show where that money would be invested, how it enhances the visitor experience, maybe helps transition towards our green agendas, absolutely fine. But we are a costly destination, and let's not forget the domestic market is a hugely important market, a year-round market for us, and our current base is basically outpricing, is too expensive for a lot of, particularly the family audience as well. So, you know, the danger of not being able to service that audience or appeal to that audience because of price is a worry.
Could I turn to David? You're south of Scotland, David. Constituents for many years have told me that it's cheaper, even when you include flights, to go to places like Menorca, where you're going, Mark, than it is to spend the same amount of time in Scotland. And I was fortunate enough to be in the wonderful village of Portpatrick a few weeks ago. But if you cost that and compare that with the equivalent, say, in Fingarola, it's much more expensive to stay in the south of Scotland, that part of the south of Scotland. And this message will probably be the same all over Scotland. Why is that? The wages in the tourist sector are much, much lower than the national average. So, and you talked in your opening remarks about profitability being an issue. So, why can't that level of charge for visitors deliver profitability for hoteliers, small hoteliers? Is the profit being eaten away by things like VAT or NI and so on? What's the reason for that? But it's historically always been the view that holidaying in Scotland is much more expensive than holidaying abroad.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question, and absolutely, it's a real challenge for the industry. Visit Scotland does excellent research, listening to visitors, and I've got to say, you know, value for money is not actually a point that we in the South Scotland and elsewhere necessarily score as high as I would like. In answer to your question, the challenges, the business costs that are there. All 750 businesses that I represent wish they could be charging less. They know they can get numbers up if they charge less. They're doing it to be able to survive this year and next year. The costs absolutely around VAT, around employment, around energy and around business rates is what determines that price point. And you're absolutely right. You compare 5 days in Portpatrick compared to, you know, a couple of weeks abroad on a package holiday, and it's a difficult proposition. One of the challenges that we have in the south of Scotland is I think we're too reliant on that domestic market, which is particularly price sensitive from my point of view. What we want to do is use that domestic market to grow the season. We've got a very short season, visitor season in the south of Scotland. We want to use that domestic market to build the shoulder season and build the winter months, and to increase our international market share to be able to try and get the price point up in the summer. At the moment, the south of Scotland has comparatively very low, one of the lowest market shares of international visitors, and that matters because, put simply, they pay more per day. So a sort of near European visitor might be spending twice as much as a domestic visitor, and a North American visitor potentially 4 times as much as a domestic visitor. So a priority for us is to be able to extend the season through the domestic market, to be able to increase the price point by getting more international visitors up, but using opportunities like this to be really honest about the challenges of price point, the challenges of value for money, and where the issues are. I mean, I want to be really clear. You know, the businesses in Portpatrick are not making oodles of money through that price point. They're trying to survive next week. They're trying to work out, how can I keep my staff next month? They're trying to think, how can I invest in the quality and the product and the story when I don't have the money to be able to do that? Those are the challenges that you will have seen in Port Patrick, and that's why it's important that we represent the challenges on business costs here.
David Leon, how do we get more people in Scotland to holiday in Scotland when you've heard that story?
I think the first thing I'd say is I think a holiday in Scotland is worth every penny. And we may not compete particularly well on.
He's going to Menorca.
Research. We may not compete well on price competitiveness, but when it comes to experiences, I think we're way above our competitors. We've always had this challenge. I mean, yes, there's issues around cost, and we know that other destinations are cheaper. We also have issues to contend with, like the weather as well, which obviously makes, jumping on a flight and going somewhere sunny for 2 weeks, a very compelling proposition. But we do need our domestic market. That's absolutely critical. It's the domestic market that keeps hospitality and tourism thriving or going throughout the year. I mean, the international visitors are absolutely vital, and that's really the icing on the cake. And the more we can do to bring in those international visitors, then great. But we do need that sort of strong domestic market to be responding to promotion and marketing of the country. But we can't shy away from the fact that we are expensive, and a lot of experiences are beyond the means of people in Scotland and the UK, particularly right now. So again, it kind of goes back to what we were talking about at the start of the conversation. We need a UK budget which is going to sort of assist, help our businesses, as has been outlined across the last hour or so in this session, but also help our consumers, our customers as well, because only if we can do that, then we can really see an uplift in domestic holidaying again. But I mean, I would reiterate that we all work incredibly hard to encourage Scots and people from elsewhere in the UK to come and enjoy or stay in the country and experience what's great about Scotland.
Thanks, Leon. Gordon, it's expensive to stay at home on holiday, but the wages are pretty low compared to the national average. So what's the reason?
Well, obviously, there's a huge combination of issues that our businesses cite. Obviously, rising fuel costs, just the cost of purchasing stock for your hospitality business. So there's just an accumulation of things all. I mean, back to my point earlier, a lot of accumulation of things all hitting at the same time, and whether a hospitality or an accommodation business, our businesses are incredibly worried about price point and starting to lose business, and how much they have to consider absorbing some of these things. So an example would be, and I suppose just to stress, in terms of setting visitor levies, considering the impact on different types of accommodation product. So, for example, we have one of the country's largest coaching hotel companies with many hotels in the national park. Their product is an affordable package coaching tour holiday based in coaching hotels, big market from England. And if there is 5+% added on plus VAT, they're incredibly worried that it's going to take their price point away from the market that is their core business, and how much they might have to just try and absorb some of it to keep that audience and keep that market. So I think the point is considering the impact on different types of accommodation product. Obviously hotels in Edinburgh are one aspect, but there's lots of different types of rural accommodation provider that need to be thought about in terms of the price point that they end up with as a result of very high visitor levy impact. But yeah, just coming back to the costs that businesses are having to pay in terms of just operating. It's just one thing after another around, if you're a rural business, fuel's a really big thing. And obviously, while there's some roles that are low paid, if you're a chef, you're doing okay at the moment. There's lots of hospitality roles that are in very high demand, a lot of competition for them as well, which is obviously a key aspect in terms of the quality of offering as well. So a lot to manage and still keep up a competitive price point, I think, is the message I'm getting from my business community.
Convener, can I just come in just to address the point around pay? Mark might want to say something as well. I mean, we're not a low-paid industry. I mean, as a minimum, businesses will be paying national living wage, which is 2/3 of median average earnings. But those are very much for entry-level jobs. And as Gordon was outlining, we've got high demand for people with particular skills, not just chefing and kitchen roles, but beyond that as well. So people can build great careers in hospitality and tourism and actually command very competitive salaries as well. And I think another important point, even for people, for servers and restaurants and hotels and so on, there's obviously a share of tips and service charge as well, which obviously boosts earnings too. And we had legislation sort of ensuring that that money is passed on in full to employees, which is good news. So there's a lot there around the pay, which is incredibly positive for people starting jobs and careers in hospitality.
Okay, thanks, Leon. Mark, did you want to add?
Yeah, I was just going to come in exactly because it's sort of Leon and I were part of the Fair Work into Hospitality inquiry, and actually one of the real positives from our sector is showing we're probably the sector that's grown the most in terms of raising the pay bar. Of course, we have a population issue, so all businesses are having to compete for local labour, so they are paying high. But my eldest son is in the industry. I probably would have steered him away from it if I thought it had been a poorly paid opportunity in a career. It's quite the opposite. And going back to this ability and desire to want to invest in the people that we've got and grow their wage and help them accelerate fast is good. Housemaids working in some of the hotels now in the city are earning nearly upwards of £40,000. So when they get the gratuity, they get the pay, and to them it's a good job, and I think that's important. And I guess one of the other sort of comments I would make is, it hurts and it grates when we hear people positioning our industry as a poorly paid, low paid sector. We know that at the base level, possibly, but very much so, more and more young people who come in at the entry point are not being paid the lowest level of pay possible. They are actually being treated very well, and they get a lot of added value in learning and well-being as well.
Thanks very much for that, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. And just to guide time, I think we'll aim to conclude this panel at about 1:45. But before we do that, I obviously like to turn to my colleague Gordon MacDonald. Gordon.
Actually, the questions I was going to ask, Wally's covered.
Kevin.
Thank you, Convener. I'm sitting here today in the great city of Aberdeen, where we have had some very good tourist experiences over the course of this year. The tall ships have already been mentioned, which was fabulous for Aberdeen in the North East and for visitors. We have had more cruise liners come into the port of Aberdeen than ever before. And one of the reasons why I'm sitting in Aberdeen and not in the committee room is because this week is Offshore Europe Week. And I think that visitors here get very good value for money, and it's definitely worth every penny coming to visit Aberdeen in the North East. We've heard earlier around about some issues which some folk describe as over-tourism. We have heard around about price gouging. Are there lessons that we could learn to attract more visitors over the piece and not repelling folk at points with high prices? Now, let me give you an example. As I said, this week is Offshore Europe Week, but it's also Aberdeen Restaurant Weeks. So up until the 14th of September, over 70 venues, restaurants and cafes in the city have got very good deals on food at a time where there could be price gouging because of offshore Europe. The leadership here is from Aberdeen Inspired, the Business Improvement District. Should there be more of this rather than less to attract return visitors? Mark, maybe?
Thank you, Kevin. And of course, you had a big golf event up in your neck of the woods as well, which has put more golf tourism visitors heading towards the Aberdeen. We work very closely with Chris Foy. Visit Aberdeenshire does a great job. I'm pleased to say that Robert Wicks, who's the CEO of P&J Live, is actually just joining our board. And there's a strong voice from the sector in Aberdeen. Frank Whitaker, who is the chair of the Aberdeen Hotels Association. I think obviously the transition of where Aberdeen's come from the oil world of a few years ago to becoming more of a tourism proposition and a destination that attracts. There's an awful lot of work that's been done by the community and the collective business industry. What I would say is that with the benefits and the deals that are on offer, and I was going to also remark earlier that very rarely have we seen at this time of year discount offers being promoted so heavily by It Is On, 5 p.m, etc. And it's to Leon's point earlier where there's probably been more of a desperation to get some cash flow, hang on to your staff, but also to get people out. And I think, absolutely support what's being done in Aberdeen. There's a similar types of activity being done in Glasgow as well, through the collective works through the chambers to try and get people out. Edinburgh have got the same sort of things here, and again it happens in Inverness. So it's not uncommon, but it's only viable if you can actually make money, and if the visitor then returns. So the combating, as I say, food inflation, costs, rates, and all these other things is something that the business owners have to do. But I think there's a real desire for businesses. We'd love to see all of our operations busy. That's why we're in this industry, because we enjoy serving and looking after people. There's nothing worse than being in an empty restaurant or an empty hotel. But it's a pointless exercise if you don't actually make any money when you're doing it, and you end up having to close your door, which sadly we're seeing far too many businesses having to close doors now rather than open them.
Leon, please.
Yeah, thank you. To your point about having a broad portfolio of events and attractions and reasons to visit a destination, that's absolutely critical, and I think that's where Visit Aberdeenshire, has plays a really key role. You can enjoy the city, you can enjoy the countryside as well, and that's absolutely critical, and obviously broadens the appeal to visitors. On the point about pricing, people will pay what they can afford to pay, what the market can actually bear.
Can I stop you there, Leon? Because I agree with you that people in the main will afford what they can afford to pay. But if you're a business person who is coming to Aberdeen in this case for a particular event that you cannot get out of, you could be price gouged. That's not happening here at this moment in time. A wise move on the part of businesses here in Aberdeen, in my opinion. So it's not just a case of what you can afford to pay. Sometimes you've got no option if you have to go to a place anyway. And sometimes, I think that businesses here in Scotland and elsewhere get that wrong by price gouging, which means it's less likely that folk will return. So do you think that Aberdeen Restaurants Week, the way that Aberdeen Inspired has done this, the coming together is the right thing to do in order to get return visitors?
Absolutely, and it's clearly an opportunity to stimulate demand, amongst visitors, but also amongst residents as well, to get people out to enjoy what they've got on their doorstep. And I don't think we should lose sight of that. Aberdeen is hugely ambitious when it comes to the conference market and bringing in more business conventions as well. So being able to kind of demonstrate price competitiveness and a very sort of open approach to pricing is to be commended, and I'm sure that Aberdeen will benefit from that moving forward. But again, I think it's about having that broad basket of of appeal, which ultimately sort of makes destinations successful, and Aberdeen City and Aberdeenshire certainly has that.
Thank you. I don't know if Gordon and David want to come in briefly here.
I suppose just an example of using events to help with a legacy for the destination. Obviously, the events that we help support and facilitate are to do with outdoor experiences. So we've been hosting the Great Scottish Swim, now Go Swim Loch Lomond, which at its peak was 2,500 participation competitors, bringing 10,000 people with them. And that's led to a legacy of a huge rise in people coming, open water swimming, paddleboarding and so on, a huge uptick in that sort of low-level water sports, bringing people to the destination. Biking, Aberfoyle has repositioned itself as gravel foil because of the gravel biking experiences you can have there, and the Duke's Weekender is an annual event that kind of brings together, again, a sort of wide participation cycling events. And the businesses see that as a way to position the destination and to get behind that. So not to exploit it for the weekend, which obviously these events bring people, but to actually use that as a way to position and to for businesses to respond to what the destination is becoming. So in Aberfoyle, you'll see more cycle shops and people appealing to that sort of visitor. And also it's allowed us to take part in some of the really big events, such as the UCI World Cycling Championships, where some of the races started in Ballach. And we also hosted the 2018 European Championship open water swimming competitions, which put Loch Lomond on the screen in front of 1 billion people around the world. So you never know where these things lead. So I think it's businesses would never imagine necessarily that outcome, but certainly using these as a way to actually, as you've said, support return visits, because people have come and experienced something and they want to come back and do it again, and to position yourself in that way.
David, please.
Thanks very much. On the core premise of your question, should businesses resist the short-term benefits of price gouging with an eye to the long-term benefits of return visitors? The short answer is yes, absolutely. And price gouging is definitely not something that can be seen in the south of Scotland. Maybe, if I might shift it a little bit, to look at the comparison between sort of rural Aberdeenshire and what they've succeeded and parts of the south of Scotland as far as that destination brand, about that story of place, of Aberdeen shifting from oil to destination. And I think it's that place-based approach that we're really interested in. It's a core part of what Visit Scotland want to do with the Scottish visitor economy, and it's a really key part of our approach. Put simply, destinations succeed when businesses work together, when they have one story and one message, and they shout it loudly and proudly. For us in the south of Scotland, that story is Scotland starts here. That's our destination brand, because the biggest challenge for the south of Scotland is people pass through it. And what we need to do is to turn the south of Scotland from a go-through place to a go-to place. We're going to succeed in doing that by working together, businesses with the public sector. So I think interesting comparisons with Aberdeenshire, and absolutely events are a key part of it. For us in the south of Scotland, for anyone that was in Stranraer while the skiffies were happening, the positivity, the energy, as well as the money that it brought is huge. Ditto the Tour of Britain, what it did for Kelso, Scotland's largest town square, I'm told, being able to attract these events and leverage them as part of that destination story. That's how destinations succeed. Thank you.
I've got a question for Mark, please, because during the course of this morning, Mark, you seemed to be more positive about the Aberdeen tourism levy than some of the others. Unless I'm picking you up wrong. Could you give us your reasoning for being more positive about what Aberdeen is doing in this regard?
Thank you for that observation. What I would say is I'm not positive about the fact that it's 7%, because I think the methodology piece is actually going to skew potentially people away from Aberdeen. Just that psychological 7% against 5% and 3% wherever else it is. However, I would say that Matthew, who has been leading the levy consultation or the conversations on behalf of the council, together with our colleagues in the industry, Frank Whitaker, Chris Foy, etc. The proposals that sit around the levy, should it be raised or when it is raised from April 27 onwards, I think there is a clear demonstration of it being invested in a positive way to help grow the visitor economy. And it's been very collaborative and well thought through. I'm not disputing other destinations of saying they haven't thought it through in detail. But if it's used to stimulate and win more of those big events and spent wisely, and if there is no other alternative to funding the DMO, which we know is a challenge, then it has to be a good thing. But I would always draw back to, again, what Vicky Miller and Visit Scotland have made very clear. This is April 27. There needs to be a very detailed economic impact assessment being done based on current and future trend before any implementation actually goes ahead.
Thank you very much. I've got one final question, convener, and it's around about conversations I've had with trade members in recent weeks. And it is around about the impact of employers' national insurance contributions and people freely admitting that they are paying less in a lot of cases, and that it is really impacting on training and bringing new people in. I know that you have got a lot of asks of the Scottish Government and of the UK Government, but this seems to me to be the biggie in the equation, certainly in this city. Has this had a major impact in terms of wage points, in terms of training, in terms of recruitment? And short answers would be good, because I know you want to finish, convener. We'll go to Mark first, please.
Yes, I don't think you can deny that we are hearing the same. The cloth has had to be cut by some businesses. There are others who are more fortunate to continue to be able to invest in their people. The bottom line is as well, the preference of the employer is to continue to invest and protect the staff they've got. But if the numbers don't cut it because pressures are being forced on them by others, then it's the difference of being able to stay open or not.
Thank you. David, please.
Yeah, I would agree with your analysis that it is the biggie. I completely agree. It's the single biggest issue, and the point that my businesses want me to absolutely represent here. What we're seeing in the South of Scotland is economic growth as far as the total value of tourism, but the most recent numbers suggest sort of static as far as job creation. That's because businesses, even if they're growing, are nervous about taking people on. So, short answer, I absolutely agree, and something needs to be done.
Thank you very much. Leon, please.
Yes, I mean, it's a regressive tax. It's had a hugely negative impact on the hospitality sector. It's something that we would like to see reversed at the UK budget.
Thank you. Gordon, please.
Yeah, as I said earlier, I've certainly heard a number of our businesses say that as a result they've had to move away from offering the real living wage in some cases. And also looking at their total staff wage bill, in some cases that is affecting the opening hours of businesses in terms of what they feel they can afford an opening at the most profitable time. So as I said, we're still seeing businesses not necessarily open 7 days a week. So yeah, a range of anecdotal impacts that I'm hearing in terms of businesses having to adjust their operation to be viable in different ways.
Thank you, convener, and I hope folk may come and visit Aberdeen during restaurant weeks. Thank you.
Yes, I think we can take it as read that all members will be making a plug for their particular parts of Scotland. Can I just ask one final question, and in a sense to tee up the next panel? We're obviously a matter of weeks away from the introduction of the visitor levy in Edinburgh. There's been some press reporting about correspondence between yourself, Mark, and City of Edinburgh Council, and indeed I think there's a decision due at one of the Council's committees later on this month about how that's proceed. I think there are a number of outstanding questions about exemptions, about payment mechanisms. I mean, I would hope that business owners themselves are fully aware and have had access to platforms and so on. I was just wondering if you could just sort of summarise the situation and the level of preparedness you think there is to introduce the levy in Edinburgh.
I think the concern that we have, and it was obviously spelt out, I think, in the conversations and the communications we've had with the council leader, despite all the really good work that's been done, and there's been lots of months at this and years, we are not ready. The guidance that was published last week is not detailed enough. We're being told that by our members. There are still questions that are conflicting with some of the information that sits on the Visit Scotland FAQ portals that hasn't been corrected, but with only a matter of days away now where businesses are expected to be compliant, and with what we believe an SSI being laid midway through October, it seems very risky to pursue a 1st of October deadline. We would be far more comfortable and I think assured of 1st of January. It's a sort of analogy that you don't put a football player into the team to play a big match if they're not fully fit. And I don't think we're quite there. Pre-season training hasn't really sort of come to its full fruition, and there is work to be done. So we're very grateful of the fact that that motion was remitted. We do hope that, for reasons that we've communicated very openly, and certainly information in detail that's coming still from colleagues and concern about getting it right, being legally compliant, there is a reason for the deferral back. It's not to stop the July implementation. It's to work more closely and continue to work closely with the industry to get it right. Edinburgh is in the spotlight. We are doing something completely different to the rest of the UK, and actually this is a chance to really get it right and do it well. And there is that whole communication piece and socialising of it, because there's a lot of people out here who haven't seen platforms, who haven't got their head around it, and even to the point that you've got, large business financial directors who are still questioning what's required of me. It's not just the many smaller business operators who will grapple with this. So 18 months was in the legislation to allow time to prepare and be ready. Even at January the 1st, that's not 18 months from when it goes live in July. So, give us the breathing space to be able to get it right.
Leon, were you wanting to add anything?
I was just going to say, Convener, you asked earlier about whether we felt that the conversation, the discussion and the policy progress of the visitor levy had gone in the direction that we had thought that it might. And, this is one area that it really hasn't. We pushed really hard for an 18-month implementation period, not because we wanted our businesses to sit on their hands, but in consultation with businesses, we knew that they were going to need that amount of time in order to be ready and organised. So having this effective date of the 1st of October has really been extremely unhelpful, to put it mildly. Around that, a lot of my members are very concerned about issues of compliance as well. If they're not ready by the 1st of October, what does this mean for them if they're trying to levy the tax on guests, and if they don't get it right? There's been conversations with City of Edinburgh Council about enforcement, because there's a lot of enforcement powers in this legislation, and verbally there's been assurance that it'll all be very light touch, but I don't think we've actually had that as a definitive approach that the Council is going to take. But fundamentally, having this date of the 1st of October is a barrier I believe, and certainly my members believe, to a smoother transition into applying this charge.
Well, can I just thank the panel for all their contributions, and that we'll just have a brief suspension to allow the panels to switch over. Thank you. I'd just like to welcome our second panel of the morning. We have Paul Lawrence, the Chief Executive of the City of Edinburgh Council, along with Ellen Williamson, who is the Head of Business Inclusion. We also have Malcolm MacLeod, the Assistant Chief Executive Place for Highland Council, Rob Dixon, the Director of Industry and Events from Visit Scotland, along with Kat Lever, who is the Director of Strategy and Competitive Intelligence for Visit Scotland. And in a slightly different version of the opening question for the first panel that we had, I'd just like to ask the panel in turn if they feel that we are ready to implement a visitor levy, and what impact they think the visitor levy will have given the economic context of the tourism industry that we heard outlined by the industry representatives at the start. And I might begin with Paul Lawrence, not least because he may want to respond to some of the points that were raised by the last panel as well. Paul.
Thank you very much, Convener. The basic answer to your question is yes. We do feel in Edinburgh we are ready to implement. On the public sector side, so to get the charging mechanism, the systems, the enforcement processes in place. A huge amount of work has been done by my colleague Elin to my left, as well as our enforcement teams and others. So gearing up for our side of things is going well, and we're getting good national support from that, from things like the Improvement Agency. So we think that's effective. We understand concern from the industry. As you're probably aware, the City of Edinburgh Council passed the visitor levy scheme in mid-January. In fact, I remember the day. It was the day of the storm warning, when everybody got the buzzes to their mobile phone because we had to have it on Teams rather than in person. So it was passed in January. So that's a detail scheme. So the industry has had since then to consider how to take the scheme forward. We are aware, Convener, we've issued guidance 2 weeks ago, detailed guidance, which we think is in sync with the Visit Scotland frequently answered questions. We are aware that there have been some discussions within the government about an additional statutory instrument, which Mark referred to earlier on. And if the government chooses to lay that before Parliament, we will obviously consider the implications of that, and we will advise our elected members accordingly. So if that happens, we'll deal with it. Other than that, we think we are in good shape. And as you probably know, Convener, I hope our approach has been demonstrated by years of industry engagement, years with accommodation providers, with attractions and so on in the lead up to members adopting the scheme. In terms of your second question, I think there's kind of two sides to it. We, in Edinburgh, just as I think is the case everywhere, we heard about Aberdeen from Mr. Stewart earlier on, that there is an urgent need to invest in what, it's not a very nice word, but if you don't mind me using it, to invest in the product. And the product, whether that be visitor-based services, whether that be attractions, whether that be events, whether that be digital services. There are all sorts of things that happen in Edinburgh, particularly in the summer, but year-round, that I think need additional investment. And the investment priorities we have set out are 100% in line with the partnership-based tourism strategy that we adopted and have refreshed. I think they will provide the investment base to invest in the product that is the city, not just the city centre, but in all areas of the city that are heavily visited. In Portobello, in Cramond, in the Pentland Hills, in all sorts of places. And we are under a strong direction from our elected members that the levy benefits the whole city, not just the city centre. We would not be able to get that money from anywhere else. Indeed, some of our current investment would be threatened because of wider financial conditions if the levy didn't exist. So it's essential to refresh, maintain, sustain and support the product, the international product, which is obviously a gateway for Scotland. I heard, as I'm sure members did, the concern from the industry about the burden of taxation, that this is something else that's added to the cost of staying in Edinburgh. Our contention is that we've done significant research on this engagement, and Edinburgh as not completely, but increasingly an international destination. This is something that visitors are comfortable in paying. So on the whole, convener, I think we're in good shape. We're aware there may be changes and we will deal with those if they arise, but we are very optimistic this provides the investment basis to sustain Edinburgh as a destination for the future.
So I'd just like to advise the witness he managed to name-check various parts of the city and not mention any parts of South Edinburgh, and that Brunsfield and Morningside could use investment as well. But could I just ask, and I will move on to the other panellists, two specific points that were raised. I think one was, and probably one that I'm most concerned about, is just the level of business awareness and engagement, given that this is coming in. And I'm just wondering if you could address that point. And then secondly, the point about the 18-month lead-in period. Now, January isn't 18 months ago, and I just think if we could, especially if there's a change coming through the SSI, just whether you could address that point around that lead time that business quite clearly asked for in the previous panel.
Yeah, my apologies, convener, for not name-checking investment that's going into your constituency. So just my understanding, and certainly Rob, and I'm sure other colleagues know this better than me, my understanding of the legislation is that there is an 18-month period from when a council decides to adopt a scheme, from when visitors visiting the city start paying for it. And that with us is from January 25, when it was adopted, to late July 26, when it will commence. So that is an 18-month period. We have then put other, as the scheme sets out, other dates within that process, which is so at what point, if one is booking for post-July 26, that would apply, and that's the October date. So there is a clear 18-month period as the legislation sets out. As I say, if the Scottish Government through the SSI say something particularly about the charging mechanism that we believe merits further consideration, then we will look in detail at that. As we always have done, we will talk to our stakeholders about that, and we will advise our elected members who will take a decision on it. But as we sit here today, without any hard knowledge about SSI or anything else, we are proceeding with guidance having been issued. To your first question, we have regular, deep and thorough engagement with the industry, particularly led by Eileen's team and our regulatory services. There may well be some outstanding questions from them, which is partly about, we hear this might change and we hear that might change. But what we can only deal with the certainty is in front of us, and we believe we've undertaken deep engagement with the industry at all stages.
I believe Gordon MacDonald would like to make a supplementary.
Thanks very much, convener. And I just wanted to ask a quick question or clarification. The International Passenger Survey highlighted in 2024 that visitors to Scotland were 4.4 million, spending £4 billion, which was a 9% increase in trips and 11% increase in spend compared to 2023. You said that you thought Edinburgh was becoming more of an international destination. My question is, has there been any analysis of what the impact would be on domestic tourists, given that businesses and domestic tourists are facing the same challenges of food inflation and higher energy costs, etc.? Has there been any analysis to say that the introduction of the visitor levy could have more of an impact on domestic tourists?
I'm not sure there has. The figures I have in front of me is that in overnight tourism, has increased from 13.8 million nights in 2014 to 20.3 million nights in 2023. So pretty much over 10 years, from 13.8 million nights to 20.3, and international visitors now account for 66% of total nights. Your I think, if I'm understanding you right, the point behind your question may be that if international visitors are more comfortable in paying the levy, but domestic visitors less so, might that in some way make Edinburgh, and therefore Scotland, because there is a significant gateway impact that Edinburgh plays for the rest of the country, as you'll see on the high street every morning, there's an impact. I don't know the answer to that, I'm afraid. I think we'll have to, there's a degree of we'll have to just see what happens. The way we've interpreted that change is actually the need for more mid-range and budget accommodation in the city. Effectively, because the market has been able to bear it, there's been a significant increase in the city of high-end accommodation. And we think there is more that needs to be done, and there are economic consequences of this, which maybe the committee will come on to, of having more service departments, which are of necessity can be more affordable, and more budget and mid-range accommodation. Now, we have to find the locations for those, because I think they will help domestic tourism. It is unlikely we will find locations for those all in the city centre. They might have to be in locations like South Edinburgh, which has got lots of opportunities, but more more seriously, actually across the wider region. And therefore, if visitors stay across the wider region, where there's a greater range of development opportunities and it's more affordable, the key challenge for us then becomes the transport connectivity, which in some areas is good, in some areas is less good. So there are implications. I think there are ways of dealing with them, but there are challenges within that.
Okay, thanks very much.
And forgive me, I think for both Elin and Kat, if you'd like to come in, say, but otherwise I'll principally go to the principal witnesses from each of the organisations. Rob, the same opening question to you. And do we think we were ready for the visitor levy, and what do you think the impact will be given the economic context of the tourism industry in Scotland?
Okay, thanks, Convener. Good morning, everyone. Between us, we'll try and cover that bit. So the economic impact
between yourself
and the data bit, we'll not
yeah.
answer everything twice. Let's put it that way.
Thank you.
Are we ready? I mean, I think the period of consultation around the draft bill and then the passing of the legislation was also matched in parallel with an expert group that pulled together the guidance, which has been published by Visit Scotland for local authorities. And that guidance was published almost a year ago now, and is designed to support local authority officials in the development of their schemes, as well as the preparatory work to consult on those schemes. Subsequently, we have ensured that there are frequently asked questions published online. So I think from that point of view, we have a suite of information available in the public domain that has been there for some time. We will update it shortly in relation to a number of points that have been made, and the precise timing of that relates slightly to the ongoing work the government are doing in respect to the SSI that you've referred to, but that doesn't delay, I don't think, or cause to delay anything which, in Edinburgh's case, they are taking ahead. We argued very strongly for the 18-month period between the decision to have a levy scheme and the point at which the levy scheme was collected, for exactly the reasons that Leon Thompson outlined in the last session, because we believed that local authorities and businesses would have a considerable amount of work to do. And in the particular case of Edinburgh, which is unique because they're first, that was always going to be a little bit more pressured than perhaps for anybody else. As things stand, I concur with what Paul Lawrence said. I think if we need to make changes, we will make changes if the government make any changes. The guidance that the Council have published aligns with our guidance. I'm not aware that there are differences in terms of the FAQs between what we are saying on the FAQs and what the guidance says that Edinburgh have published. So I think we're in a reasonable position to take this forward. But we are at September with the levy due to be collected in July next year. There is more to be done. I don't dispute that. But in the process that we're following, I think we'll be there. Maybe ask Kat to say something about impacts, the numbers.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Convener, and thanks, Committee. So in terms of, I think the previous panel covered really well the three big takeaways in terms of the industry impact as it stands. So we know international markets are really driving growth, and that's a very, very positive story for us. However, domestic tourism is softer, it's stabilising, but it remains very fragile. And I think to your question, that's a critical point, and that split of international and domestic visitor needs to be considered by each region and local authority when they're looking at levy and developing that and the impacts it will have on their visitor split, because we know that the trading environment remains increasingly pressured with both forward bookings and yield under significant pressure. So I think the impacts are not a blanket. There are lots of complexities and differences when we get down to regional levels, and that is for each local authority to work with their businesses, with their communities and with ourselves to make sure it's appropriate for their industry.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, can you maybe just come back in? One very brief point to say that in terms of the frequently asked questions on our website, we will continue to work with councils and with sectors, colleagues behind, to ensure that the questions that businesses need answered, where they're not clear in either our guidance or the council guidance, we address that as best as we possibly can in the frequently asked questions. So we will continue to do that and publish further frequently asked questions on an ongoing basis.
I believe the Deputy Convener has a brief supplement.
Yeah, it's just a quick question, and possibly, if you'll forgive me, a slightly cheeky question. This session, you know, we've heard a clear articulation from the previous panel about concerns being expressed, and we're getting a totally different view. Where is the disconnect occurring? And why, do you think? I accept what you're saying about timescales and working through in the iterative process that you're describing, but it still seems to me that there is a disconnect, and it'd be useful, I think, for the committee to understand, given that, you know, we're in politics, people will adopt a position, and we understand that probably better than anybody, but at the same time, we have a duty to make sure that we get to the right place, you know, in everybody's interest. So who'd like to take that cheeky question?
Somehow I seem to have been left with this one. I think there's the majority of the issues are around operational implementation and interpretation of the legislation. The SSI, the discussions around that have been ongoing for quite some months now, and the method for implementing it and the exact wording of how it works I think has been run past both local authorities and sector stakeholders, etc. And I think there's just been there's some areas around that needs ironed out. When we issued our information for Edinburgh, that was very much specific to those sort of idiosyncrasies, if you will, that are Edinburgh specific. So, for example, Edinburgh has introduced a 5-day cap, and that's not national. So we've tried to focus on the things that are Edinburgh specific, leaving the national parts for Business Scotland to include in their guidance. We are conscious of the fact that Business Scotland will struggle to issue their national guidance without that kind of clarity as well on the SSI. So we are working in tandem very much between us, trying to ensure that we've ironed out all issues. But I think this is a unique position. We've never done this before. And there will be things that will be coming up continuously and that we're trying to respond to. I just like to clarify a couple of points as well, that the 1st of October date is the date at what point bookings made for stays on or after the 24th of July become leviable. There is no obligation to actually charge it as of the 1st of October. That is a business-specific decision. The levy in itself doesn't actually become chargeable until a chargeable transaction happens. That does not happen until the visitor checks in. The visitor cannot check in before the 24th of July. So I think that there needs to be some clarity around that as well. And I know that there's been some confusion around the reporting and how it will be reported. And I think some industry members mentioned earlier as well around there not being a platform yet. That is because the platform is around how accommodation providers report back to local councils, which will not happen until after those chargeable transactions have actually happened. So what we have tried to do now is say that the information that you will need to give to us in October 2026 will be this information. But it is up to accommodation providers that if they take a booking now for a stay after 24th of July, that's when they will need to gather that information so they have it. But we have tried to keep it as high level as possible. So we're not asking for personal data. There's no requests for copies of passports or anything like that. So we're trying to keep it to literally numbers of rooms let and the price let.
And I can hear you've answered the question in terms of process development and iteration, as I alluded to, and that dependency between the two of you. But the other concern that came through from the earlier panel was about the percentage versus a flat rate. Do you have anything to add about that? Because it seemed to me from the earlier panel that there still remain significant concerns. Are you just putting that to one side because obviously your job is to focus on the practical implementation, and therefore does anybody have anything to add, anyone else in the panel, on what still feels like a disconnect, setting aside the operational process things that you've clarified?
I wonder that it may be interesting to hear from a colleague from Ireland, because it may be different arguments in different places based on the accommodation base. Our members actually felt quite strongly that a percentage approach was fairer, given the accommodation mix in the city of Edinburgh. That might be different in different places, and therefore we are comfortable with what the legislation says, and we think it's a fair way of introducing it. I'm aware that up and down the country people will have different views on that.
Okay.
If I may, just in terms of where we are in Highland, and I'll come back to the flat rate versus percentage, we are slightly behind in terms of having carried out a consultation back end of last year, early this year, which was extended. We got over 4,000 responses. And I think the reason we haven't pushed to implement, so are we ready? The answer is no, as in of today. We are taking a bit of time to go through, not just go through the responses, but also to do a bit more work on some of the issues that have been raised. And I think Paul's right. You know, there are different issues from a quite concentrated city authorities to an area covering a third of Scotland with a very wide variety of different accommodation types. And with these different types come different pressures. And just to give you an idea of what we are looking at, because I think if I were to, there were those who are opposed to the levy in principle, there are those who are supportive of a levy, and there is the majority are not opposed to a levy, but are opposed to the levy as we presented it, which was based on 5% and no exemptions. So we've actually got out of that consultation a huge amount of valuable information. And the things that we're working through at the moment are, not surprisingly, looking much more in depth at the economic impact assessment. We did do what I would accept now as a high level economic impact assessment at the start. So now we are doing a lot more work on that, and particularly looking at the different sectors, as I've said, and the different geographic areas and the different impacts of seasonality that, you know, an area like Highland will inevitably have. You know, when you compare the Innermurray Firth to the more rural parts of Highland, they do offer very different challenges. Exemptions, you know, such a huge area to travel within in terms of hospital visits, etc. We are looking at how exemptions that can be put in place within the guidance and the legislation that's available. A lot of pressure, a lot of representation coming in on VAT thresholds and particularly around our smaller operators and the impact that might have. There has been a lot of discussion about the collection methodology, collection processes, the impact on business, the burden on business, which we are now looking at, and, you know, slightly on the coattails of Edinburgh and the other cities to see how they're dealing with it, but continuing to be involved in developing the system along with the improvement services. So these are the key things that have come out, but really where we are is taking that time and looking at how we can best move forward. We have set up a visitor levy reference group. It's got really good representation. It certainly hasn't. It's helped the debate and the discussion as we went through the end of the consultation into this phase we're currently in, and I do hope that engagement with business will continue, because one of the other areas that businesses and communities were clear on was about what the levy would be used for, and I think, as was set out earlier, the recognition that given the scale of the area, given the different infrastructure challenges we've got, given some of the huge successes we've seen, which have been helped by the Rural Tourism Infrastructure Fund as well as a number of other funding sources, we've demonstrated that improving the visitor experience for visitors at our honeypot sites or developing new facilities that extend dwell time, like Inverness Castle, for example, which is the key one for us this particular year, is really appreciated in communities that are affected by different types of tourists. The flat rate and the percentage rate obviously came up a lot, and we are bound by the guidance and bound by the legislation. Our convener did write to the Minister asking whether there was any prospect of that being reconsidered. So, we were recognising that is a fairly common theme, but for the reasons that have already been set out at length, I'm sure, not just here, but at various other places, we're bound by what we're allowed to do. But that was very clearly a sentiment that was coming out.
Okay, thank you
very much. I believe Stephen Kerr wanted to ask a supplementary.
It was kind of related to what Michelle Thompson's asked, because Paul Lawrence started out by saying we are in good shape, but the we seemed to be the council, right? But the council were communicated with by the Scottish Tourism Alliance in July, saying extending the we to include all the people that are going to have to collect these taxes effectively and send them to the council. They were saying in their communication to you that there is still, this is as of the 14th of July, there is still no practical or technical guidance from the Council or Visit Scotland, despite assurances we'd received, like the guidance that was published for local authorities back in October 2024. So my question is very simple. I hear what public sector bodies are saying, we are ready, but what's the feedback you're getting on the basis of this sort of communication from the Scottish Tourism Alliance? Because clearly the people that are on the front line of this, they don't sound like they're very ready. They don't sound like they're ready at all. So what's your response to this kind of representation, and what is your broader ongoing engagement with the sector, and what are they telling you?
Thank you for the question. I think probably two things from me, and then I might ask Elin to talk about ongoing engagement, if that's all right, to your last point. Firstly, since that letter was received, we have issued our guidance to the sector. Do I think that's made everybody absolutely clear on everything and they're all, think we're marvellous and we're over any issues? No, I don't. But I think that has helped. So the guidance being published is a key part of what's happened. Secondly, this issue that I referred to before, and I think Robish mentioned as well, of this possibility of an SSI being agreed has introduced a degree of uncertainty, and it's not for me to speak on behalf of the sector, but I wonder whether it's that possibility is partly behind people going, well, can you not wait and see what the government does, and then that will allow us to move forward. That is an issue which will be debated by our elected members at our Finance and Resources Committee in a week and a half. I think, as Mark said earlier, that was remitted from our council meeting last week so that we as officers could try and just get a bit of certainty on that. But to repeat, the broad mood of our members is we've passed a scheme. We've given the 18-month period. We've worked closely with the industry. If there are going to be some changes through the SSI, then we will look at that, but we don't know. So I suppose there is some external uncertainty, which is a perfectly good reason for concern, and that's not within our gift to do anything about. And there are some internal issues. I hope that the issue of publishing our guidance since that letter came out has addressed some of those. Eileen, do you want to talk a bit about ongoing engagement, if that's okay?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that we have engaged a lot, and for us, obviously, being a local authority area, we are focusing our engagement with those stakeholders that are in the local authority. Although we do speak with the national agencies, obviously, but we have focused very much on those matters. As I said earlier, our information is Edinburgh specific, and we're focused on the matters that are specific to Edinburgh. We need to be aware of what's happening nationally for natural reasons. Could we have issued our information earlier? Yes, absolutely. We were ready to issue it before the summer recess, but we did hold off because we wanted to be cognizant of the national position as well. We're now in a position where we are very close to that 1st of October line, and we're not really that clear on the national position in terms of the SSI being late, but we do have a legislation. It is clear and it is there. So in a way, to go ahead with the implementation based on the legislation as it stands, as it is published and is effective, would in many ways make more sense rather than holding off to see if there will be changes further down the line. And that is also the general sentiment that we have. And obviously there will always be people of an opposing opinion, but in the engagement that we have had with the local stakeholders, many of them are saying, yes, let's do this. We've been working towards this for a very long time. Let's go ahead, let's try and do this together.
The sentiment of the stakeholders?
Of many local stakeholders,
businesses,
yes.
They say,
yes,
let's go with it.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Stephen. Murdo.
Thank you, Convener. Good morning, panel. I'm not going to go over all the questions I went over with the first panel. I've just got a few specific items I'd quite like to follow up. And maybe I could just start with Malcolm, because I was really interested in what you had to say about the economic impact assessment you were now doing on the Highlands, which suggests that that wasn't part of the original work that you'd done. I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit more about how that's being done, and specifically, are you looking at different parts of the Highlands, given you cover, as you said, a third of the landmass of Scotland, differential impacts, and would it be possible for Highland Council to look at bringing in the visitor levy only in certain parts of the Highlands as opposed to everywhere?
So, well, starting at the beginning, the economic impact assessment, yes, is covering all parts of the Highlands, but it's also covering all sectors. And we're trying to sort of capture everything that came out. And you know, there are big differences between some of the pressures in Inverness in terms of occupancy very high compared to other areas where it's incredibly seasonal, as you will totally appreciate. Different areas where there's more pressure from the service accommodation sector than there are perhaps from certainly large hotels. So we're trying to find a way, so we're using an external economic consultant to help us navigate our way through that. We have looked at the geographical differences. We have looked at, and alongside that with seasonality, and it is really complicated to get to a point where because there are different areas that do better at different times of year in terms of Badenoch and other parts where you're just not seeing the same level of Caithness, for example, not the same level of visitors in winter months. So is it possible? It's certainly something we're looking at, and then also looking at how we build seasonality into that, if that's a possibility. So,
for example, you could apply the visitor levy at certain times of year and not at other times.
And I'll just look. Well, Rob's nodding, so that means that means yes. And it's certainly something. When we actually looked at the heat maps and we shared that with the industry as well as part of our reference group, there are very clear patterns, and not always the ones you expect in terms of where the the main, if I could call it, pressure points, Skye is often raised as, somewhere which gets huge numbers of visitors, and if I'm allowed, I'll come on to talk about the success of the work we've done at the store, for example, which is demonstrating how investment in infrastructure.
You get married there. I heard
can
the other day. Yes.
For a small fee to Highland Council,
yeah.
That is possible. But that set up a real benefit. We're something like 32% up in visitor numbers from where we were 2 years ago. But the pressure areas, in terms of bed nights, obviously Inverness is a clear hot area, but others, Lochaber, for example, which didn't, immediately come out to me when I was originally started this, and Badenoch, are real areas where there is pressure on beds. So that's the intention of our economic impact assessment. We're hopeful. And I haven't had political approval yet, but we are hopeful to be in a position by the end of the year to come forward with our outcome of the consultation and the revised impact assessment.
Okay, and that's very interesting because it suggests that the whole picture is maybe a bit more complex than people maybe thought at the very start.
And I would, as my professional response to that is absolutely. And I think the benefit of the engagement we did have, I mean, it was difficult at times, but the benefit of it is that we now have such a rich source of information from right across all accommodation providers. And the one thing I didn't mention, and I probably don't even know if I want to mention it, but the other thing that came out is obviously the missing part of the jigsaw that many people in the industry see in terms of accommodation providers is the whole motorhome issue and how that, particularly around equalisation of addressing impact, and that has come out of it as well in a way perhaps that we hadn't quite expected.
That's a whole new can of worms, which we could spend the rest of the day on, but I'll bypass that for the moment. So just one more question, Malcolm, because you touched on this, I think, in your answer to one of my colleagues. I think you said the convener had written to the Scottish Government suggesting, I think, that council should be given the option of a fixed fee rather than a flat rate. Sorry, other way around. Sorry, a flat rate rather than a percentage. Yeah.
Whether the Scottish Government would be willing to consider it, I think was the way the letter was said.
Okay.
And I'm not sure, as of today, I'm not sure of a response we've given.
Okay, thank you. And maybe I could ask that same question to Paul or Ellen from Edinburgh, because Paul, I think you were almost hinting in one of your previous answers that whilst Edinburgh was content with a percentage, that allowing others to have a flat fee might be the way forward.
I'm honestly not sure it's my place to kind of give advice on that. Our elected members were strongly of the view that a percentage was the fairest. I suppose what I was trying to say was the accommodation mix and the visitor mix is different in different parts of the country, and therefore the flexibility in the scheme, in the way that you've heard from Malcolm, seems to exist to try and tailor a scheme accordingly, as long as engagement and consultation has been deep and effective in the way that I think you've heard Malcolm articulate.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not expecting you to make policy on behalf of Edinburgh Council. Ellen, do you want to come in? Yeah.
Yes, sorry, it's just to say that when we did our engagement before the levy came in, before the legislation came in, we asked people that exact question: should it be a percentage or should it be a flat rate? And it was quite split across the board from the people that we asked, so consulting people in Edinburgh. A slight majority were more in favour of a percentage. But the interesting thing is that both types of respondents used the exact same argument around fairness as their reason for why a flat rate was more fair or why a percentage was more fair. So it's obviously strong feelings either way. A big positive around percentages is that thanks to dynamic pricing, which is a pretty widespread occurrence in the industry, as you know, a percentage is already addressing a large part of the whole off-season or areas. So, for example, in Edinburgh, we did discuss should we have a different percentage for different parts of the city or different times of the year, and realised that actually the dynamic pricing has already addressed that. So I would say that from that perspective, a percentage is a lot easier to handle. But if you are looking for a flat rate, then that's maybe more pertinent if you want to look at things like times of year or different parts of the local authority.
Okay, thanks very much. Okay, I've got one more question for Visit Scotland, either Kat or Rob, whoever wants to answer this, and is in the same territory. Specifically, this issue of an economic assessment. So you say in your written submission to us, you say this: before considering a levy, a local authority should examine the profile of their visitors, whether largely domestic or international, and the potential impact of a levy on businesses and visitors within the current economic and competitive travel landscape. Local authorities should also consider the potential impacts of a levy on factors such as price competitiveness and quality, visitor demand, occupancy and seasonality. So that's a very clear statement of where Visit Scotland are. So given that, would you expect local authorities to be doing the sort of economic assessment that Malcolm's talked about, that the Highlands are now doing? So before introducing this, we have a full picture, as opposed to a situation I outlined earlier where, for example, in Perth and Kinross, it's being presented in some quarters as, this could raise 9 million for the council. This is free money. What's not to like? All this cash coming in, but it doesn't look at the other side of the equation, which is, if this is introduced, is there going to be a negative impact on visitor numbers?
So I think there is no such thing as free money. My accountant grandfather told me, so I kind of take the lesson to heart. It is complex, and we've been very clear in both the consultation on the bill and subsequently in the work to develop the guidance, and subsequently in the considerable volume of activity that my colleagues undertake with local authorities across the length and breadth of Scotland, that there's a chronological order, an optimum chronological order as to how this should be approached. We've always said that if a levy is introduced, the funds from a levy should be to deliver the visitor economy strategy that you have put in place, on which you have already consulted and on which we would hope industry would be supportive. And Paul referenced the position in Edinburgh that was reached where they'd done considerable work on the strategy they had for their visitor economy. And in doing that work, you will begin to assess and consider some of the issues that you are talking about, and therefore understand better the priorities in delivery of that strategy. As you then move into the development of the levy scheme, you need to look at the parameters of the visitor economy in your area, the appropriateness of a scheme in general terms, the accommodation mix, the seasonality. There's a huge difference between a relatively densely populated area such as Edinburgh and, as Malcolm's articulated, the Highlands. Therefore, the parameters of caps on nights, seasonality, different levies in different places becomes part of it. All of that, considered as you begin to draft and develop the scheme, allows you to build a picture of what may or may not be possible. Finally, and you should be consulting informally and with businesses and the normal range of stakeholder groups, the local authorities will have well-established networks to speak to. You should be doing all of that work. And that should land you in a position to undertake a statutory consultation with a well-prepared and well-considered proposition. Within that proposition should be clarity about the ability of the proposed scheme to deliver your strategy, to fit with the market that you've got, and yes, some modelling to show what funds might be raised and how those funds might be delivered. The point I really want to emphasise is this is complex, it requires detailed work and detailed consultation, and it takes a period of time. By my calculation, roughly, Edinburgh took somewhere in the region, and I think you said years, Paul, I think at least 3, if not, because of the COVID interruption, probably 5, maybe even longer years, to get to the position of the proposition. Now, there was various delays because there wasn't legislation and there was COVID, so I'm not saying it should take 5 years, but it should take a considerable period of time for that detailed work to be done, in order that you've got an understanding of the impacts on your local economy, the impacts on your visitor economy, and the benefits that accrue in the delivery of your strategy and the investment in that strategy.
So I think that's a yes in answer to my question. Should there be detailed economic impact assessments done?
I'm not going to say yes specifically to that, because there's so many different ways of presenting economic impact assessments. And I'm not going to say that there's one way of doing it that's better than the other. But if you've undertaken that work, you will arrive at a position where you've got the evidence that supports the proposition you're making or not.
Sorry, can I just come in on that? I'd very gently like to push back on that, because I think it may be complicated to arrive at an answer, but there is actually one very fundamental point that needs to be addressed, which is the price elasticity of demand, i.e., if you are putting up the price by 5%, what will that do to the impact of demand? Is that an assessment that you are recommending made? And actually,
that's one of the questions that should be answered.
And everywhere that it's being proposed, has that been an assessment of that elasticity of demand been made?
I think, and colleagues have been through this in detail, I think they've done the best they can with the data that they've got available. We know from our work that the data is not always available to allow you to do this work.
Which is slightly different, saying that there's lots of different ways of looking at it.
There are, yeah.
Could add, I think there's two really key points in what needs to come out of that assessment. So one point is the value for money and the price point to the end consumer and the type of consumer visitor within that region. But the other is the business, so the cost benefit of running a levy scheme for the composition of businesses that sit within that local authority. So I think they're two slightly distinct but really important parts of the assessment that need to be gotten to the bottom of.
Yeah, I mean, can I ask? I mean, has Edinburgh, so Edinburgh is going to put up price of accommodation by 5%, and that's the decision the council made. Has Edinburgh made an assessment of what that will do to visitor demand?
As best we can, convener. So, hotel prices in Edinburgh between 2019 and 2024 have gone up on average by 82%, which is nearly twice as much as any other UK city. That's before a levy. So has that had an impact on demand for our hotels? Not particularly. And, you know, the media is full of stories about the costs of accommodation, particularly in the summer period, particularly when large events are taking place. We don't have any mechanism at all to control that, as you will know. And I'm sure colleagues from the industry would say that those times are often few and far between, and therefore what businesses do is as it were harvest when they can for the leaner times of the year. But that price elasticity has that kind of increase impacted on visitors to Edinburgh, particularly overseas visitor? The answer to that question is no. Now that is quite helpful evidence. Is there a percentage at which I can say to you, if we went above X, people would stop paying it? I don't believe it's possible to answer that question.
Again, can I push back on that? And my, as somebody that stopped doing economics in first year of university, I may be going beyond the bounds of my expertise. I think what you're saying is slightly different. It's not that there isn't elasticity of demand, it's that you have rising levels of demand. But in any given moment of time, the market will be finding a price. If you were to put, at that moment in time, prices up by 5%, you would expect to see some reduction, whether it's an absolute 5% perfect, 5% drop in demand. It may be 1% drop in demand, but you would expect to see it. Has that? And I accept that may be a difficult assessment to make, but to say that there will be no impact on demand, I think is questionable. I just wonder, has that assessment in terms of what a 5% increase would do to demand, which is a different point to saying that there's rising levels of demand?
I'm not sure I said there would be no impact. Obviously, time will tell what the impact is. But as Rob says, it's a complex picture. I'm not an economics graduate either, but if there is a surfeit of demand over supply, then, what tends to happen is that prices go up. And that is what we have seen in Edinburgh. As I said before, we believe one of the ways of addressing that is by more mid-market product. Now, that mid-market product will help ease demand, but it will have a 5% levy on top of it. Can we say as a result of that less people will come. We need to see what happens. That's not been international evidence. Now, I completely accept that international comparisons, as ever, are often riddled with issues because the taxation base is very different in different places. But do we think the global position of demand for people to come to Edinburgh, as long as we continue to invest in the product? And for us, you know, we do not think there's some immutable law of nature that people will always come to Edinburgh. We cannot be complacent. We have to invest in the public realm. We have to invest in safety. We have to invest in better cleansing. We have to support our festivals. We have to support our here all year attractions. If we keep doing that, is there evidence that demand, because the prices have risen, is dropping off? The answer to that is no. But we must continue to invest.
I mean, again, just in Highland, is that part of the consideration? Is an assessment going to be made of what and I don't know what was being proposed, but you know, a 1% increase in price, what percentage difference would that make in demand? Is that something that is being attempted?
I don't think it's as linear as that in terms of the different percentage rates, but it is looking at all the information we've received from everybody, and actually had really good input from different sectors. But basically address that question about, you know, is there, because a lot of the people in the consultation were worried about the impact on numbers of visitors. So that is something we are going to be looking at. And just seeing the sensitivity. I mean, it's that broad point, because it is supply and demand.
So I mean, I'm probably abusing my position as convener very early on to my tenure, but I'll just make the brief observation is, as a business owner, if I was to put my prices up at my instigation by 5%, I absolutely would be making a forecast on what that would do to my revenue, and it may be a difficult calculation, but it's one that I would expect if local authorities are saying we're going to put our prices up by a certain percentage, what that will do to demand and to revenue. I think that's I think a fairly sort of fundamental business assessment that if your businesses would be making it, I think local authorities should be making it. At that point, I will. Murdo,
yeah, I'm done. Thank you.
Fantastic. I believe now we're moving to Willie.
Thanks, convener. Thank you. Just moving away from the visitor levy to talk about wider issues about tourism, and I'm glad my colleagues from Visit Scotland are here. Your Chief Exec was here a year ago, and I raised a few issues about the Visit Scotland website. So it was to give you an opportunity to update the committee and others about the progress with the website and what its real purpose and intention are. It's never intended to be a bookings website, because other players do that. But I raised some significant drawbacks and faults and problems with the website, and I just wanted to ask Rob and Kat if you could possibly give the committee an update on any progress with the website and where it's heading.
Yep, of course, I'll take this one. So there has been considerable work on visitscotland.com, which is our consumer-facing website. So we have several different websites for different audiences. Since Vicky appeared at the committee last year and you asked those questions, I think that's a really key point with regards to what the role of the website is. So we are very, very clear that we play a role at an earlier stage of the kind of visitor-consumer journey. So it's about inspiring people to consider Scotland as a destination to come to, and then help them plan that journey once they decide that we are the destination of choice. We are absolutely not a booking platform, and there are many others that operate in that field who we signpost to and support, albeit there are listings for both businesses and events on the website as it stands. But one of the things that we are constantly doing is looking at what user behaviours are telling us, what technology trends are coming into play, and how we best support those through our digital infrastructure. So what we know is that very little search traffic is now coming from your traditional search engines, so your Googles, etc. That is changing due to things like generative AI. So search engines are presenting information that they are scraping from websites such as Visit Scotland, and therefore people are not clicking through to the website on the same level as they once did. which means that we need to think about how we make sure that rather than it only being Visit Scotland that appears in those types of searches, we are getting the businesses in front of people when they're searching. And the same goes for an increase in things like social search. So we're seeing a huge increase in people searching via social platforms and kind of building out their itineraries and their travel plans based on aspirational itineraries and trips of others. And so again, making sure that we mirror that with the types of content, the way that we structure the content and build the website moving forward.
Okay. We've heard some contributions from colleagues about, in Edinburgh's had a fantastic summer and the number of visitors coming in. Colleagues have mentioned their own particular locations, so it can be quite difficult for my part of the world, East Ayrshire, to attract tourists. There's plenty on offer, I assure you, but if you use the Visit Scotland website, you are particularly badly let down. And if I could give you a couple of examples that I raised a year ago that are still evident today. If you're looking for a hotel in Kilmarnock and you use your website to say Kilmarnock Hotels, it takes you to Cruden Bay, which is 200 miles away. And if you look for the Kilmarnock Park Hotel, which is the biggest hotel in Kilmarnock, it asks you if you're looking for a hotel in Peebles. Now, that doesn't help when we're trying to get tourists to come to my part of Ayrshire, which is fantastic. These search difficulties are still evident within the search engine that's at the heart of this website. Are you addressing that and trying to correct it?
Yeah. So the issues you're talking about relate specifically to our destination management system, so the system that holds our business listings. And I suppose it's really important for us to stress that those business listings are updated by the businesses, not by ourselves, and they're updated and maintained, and therefore the accuracy of those listings goes down to the level of update and maintenance, although something that we obviously try and proactively work with businesses on. One of the solutions that we're looking to put in place there is introducing pulls from APIs, so using things like Google Business Profiles and pulling that API information directly onto our website so that we get a larger proportion of businesses and more accurate information. What we also do is already work with businesses to make sure that those profiles are up to date and that they're optimised so that they appear appropriately in search. So that should help to counter some of the challenges we face in that space because there is third-party information that we're drawing on.
I mean, I don't want to dwell on this because I know it's a big issue, but it's nothing to do with the information that's being supplied. It's the search engine that's getting it wrong. Its geotagging is fundamentally wrong and broken. It doesn't do that. To take you to Cruden Bay 200 miles away is just daft. It's the search engine that's making a mistake, not the supplier of information. So I take it the assurance, Kat, that you're going to be attending to this kind of thing.
Yeah, it's something that's actively being looked at.
If I was a visitor wanting to come to my area of Scotland, to be taken 200 miles away is not what I was expecting.
No, absolutely fair.
As the outcome for it. So in terms of the future, what should the website be? Because it's never going to be a booking site. What will it be beyond what we can see today? How will it develop? And what additional offer can it make for tourists coming to Scotland? Do you think?
I think it will continue to adapt based on the needs of the user. So the kind of primary goal at the moment is to really up the level of a kind of immersive multimedia content to really give a feel of sense of place and what the person will experience when they're here. We know that our landscapes, our warmth of welcome, all these things are real assets and set us out against our competition. So making sure that we can really help the user in a digital space feel some of those things and therefore feel compelled to book a trip to Scotland is absolutely paramount.
Next year, I don't want to be asking the same. Well, I won't be here next year, but if you come back before next May and we'll ask you these questions, well, I hope we could see an improvement in this because it's really, really important, and we rely on that in the website to an extent to bring more people to my part of Scotland. Thank you. Thanks for that.
Thank you.
Stephen Carr, were you wanting to ask questions?
Just very briefly, because I know we're running out of time. And it's back to this thing about price elasticity and supply and demand. Because in the previous panel, we heard this, I thought, incredible stories about people sharing a glass of wine in the north of Scotland, people sharing a bowl of soup. The whole price thing, I think, it's a real hotspot for us, and we should be really concerned about how we're being perceived. You actually mentioned this, Visit Scotland, in your submission to us. You talk about the perception of value for money. and you talk about how you are aware that tour operators are beginning to move to alternative destinations. So when we talk about data points, the data points are there either existing or there to be gathered around visitor reactions to what they perceive to be value for money. Now, I did hear, and I completely agree as a Scot, a visit to Scotland is worth every penny. That was said previous. So I agree with that. But we've got to listen to what people say about what they perceive to be, in your own words, value for money. And then you mentioned yourselves, the tour operators. So gathering that data, we seem to be facing a problem that we could describe as price, but ought to be really framed in the context of value for money. So what is it that Visit Scotland? We've heard from Willie about the problems with the website. I mean, I think it was a big mistake that you closed down your information centres, because one of Scotland's greatest assets is its people, and a friendly face across a counter, a desk, or in a visitor centre or an information centre is value for money. So I think you've been stripping value out of the proposition that you put before potential visitors and actual visitors to Scotland. But how do you intend, because in your actual submission, you don't address the issue, you mention it, but you don't address it. So what are you planning to do in order to drive up a perception of value for money?
So I guess I can start on that one. I think going back to the kind of complexities of this, it's not a blanket picture. So that value for money is very different depending on what visitor and segment of the market you're talking to and where they are coming into Scotland. So I think it's worth recognising and acknowledging that. And there's
is that based on data?
Yes, yeah.
Right, so you do have that data.
Yeah, and so I think earlier it was referenced, I think Mark Crothall referenced things like domestic families, for example. We are seeing a decline in domestic staycations as a consequence of cost of living and that budget-conscious traveller. So there are definitely segments of the market where price has a much greater impact. I think at a national level, we look at how competitive and attractive we look on an international scale. And the additional complexity that we have with regards to things like levies, but a variety of things, is that because we present this at point of sale, it means when somebody's looking to come to a destination, no matter where in the country they are going, they will see that cost up front, which is a positive thing for consumer transparency. But what it does do is it then creates a point of differentiation potentially between us and another destination. So we know, for example, that the likes of, say, Expedia, who's one of the big major online tour operators, over 50% of people searching their website don't yet have a destination in mind. They're looking for inspiration. And so that is where we work with partners like Expedia, like businesses within Scotland, to make sure that we get the product and the profile on those platforms and hopefully inspire people to come to Scotland. So a lot of our market investment is through that type of exposure, making sure we have market share. But then we have to make sure that we convince people that it is value for money and what they get is something that is unique and worth every penny.
Yeah, but what about the actual customer experience on the ground? So that is the process that gets people here. What about the actual experience they have when they're here? What measurement do you do of that, and what thoughts have you got around that as an organisation?
So we don't control the customer experience once they're in market, because we are not the provider of we're not the hospitality or the business, but we do measure visitor intent, behaviour, sentiment, etc. And so we look at how they feel things were in relation to value for money. So I believe David from the South of Scotland mentioned earlier that in the South of Scotland, that is one of the metrics from our research that they identified they could do more in. So that value for money and quality perception piece needs work, and it is different again across different parts of the industry and across different parts of the country. So it is something that we measure and we look to. And what we know from behaviour research is that the intent remains really high. People still want to come to Scotland. The repeat visitation rate is very, very high. And so once they've come and experienced it, it's less of a challenge. It's getting them here in the first place.
Right. I'm not sure you're addressing my question, but I think we're running out of time. Maybe it's something you can pick up later. I mean, does Scotland not have any say then in the quality, the value proposition of the product?
We do, and
you do.
Yeah, and Rob's team works very, very closely with businesses on the ground around supporting product development that is designed to meet consumer demands. So we will do the research to understand what visitors are travelling for, what they expect, and what they would like to experience, and then help to inform businesses in that product development. And then we work with businesses to support them in getting that to market. So making sure it's online and bookable and via intermediaries, etc., accessible to international audiences.
Thank you, Stephen. I think Gordon MacDonald. Gordon, were you wanting to ask questions?
It was just a couple of points of clarification, predominantly to Paul and to Malcolm. Many visitors, whether domestic or international, books via an international hotel chain website or a global booking platform. Have they expressed any concerns about how they will cope with a visitor levy? And my second point is, when the scheme is up and running, what financial support will be provided to accommodation providers in order to do the admin in relation to the visitor levy? Paul first.
I think Aileen might.
All right, okay.
So it might be easier if I take, particularly on your second point, that is one of the Edinburgh-specific parts of the Edinburgh scheme, so we have said that accommodation providers can retain 2% of the levy that they've collected, so not 2 out of the 5%, but 2% of the levy collected, to meet some of the administration costs, because we recognise that it will obviously not cover all of it, but it will meet some of it. So that's the second part of your question. In terms of the first part, that was one of the reasons why. So initially, when the scheme was agreed on the 24th of January this year, we had intended a much shorter transition period. So bookings from, I think at that point, sorry, my memory fails me, but I think we had said at that point it was bookings from 1st of May onwards will be liable for the levy. But after conversations with online travel agents and industry, they felt strongly that they needed longer to prepare. And 9 months was, on general, they said obviously the longer the better, but we can do it in 9 months, and that is why the 1st of October date was set in the first place.
And just to, I suppose it's the same answer in the sense that we didn't receive a huge amount of response from the type of operators that you're talking about, but we did recognise that it is a really, really important part, particularly in terms of our international visitors. So we are effectively looking at the proposals that have come through Glasgow, Edinburgh and Aberdeen, which do have an element retained to deal with that administrative burden, and we're keen that if it is to be brought forward, that will be part of our eventual proposition.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gordon. Kevin Stewart. Kevin, would you like to ask questions?
Yes, thank you, Convener. And my questions are for Visit Scotland in the main. We've heard a lot this morning, earlier on, about over-tourism in certain areas. It has been said by many that Visit Scotland concentrates on certain areas and not others in terms of its marketing. I have to say that people here in Aberdeen and the North East often feel aggrieved about your website and other communications, particularly on the run-up to the Tall Ships events here in the North East. So my question is, would it be wise for Visit Scotland to look at its website, at its marketing, and actually highlight the other places that are not currently facing over-tourism?
Yeah, apologies, my colleague can't leave her. She's to leave because she's travelling today. I think the first point to say is on the over-tourism piece, which was picked up, I thought, really quite well and in some detail in the previous panel session. We would not recognise over-tourism as a Scottish issue. We recognise there are 1 or 2 busy places on particularly dry, sunny days, but I don't think that should equate to a narrative that Scotland has an over-tourism issue. And I think, in particular, Murdo Fraser put his finger on it earlier when, actually, there are large parts of Scotland that you've referred to in your question as well, who would say we do not have over-tourism. We have a desire to have more visitors to our area. Which leads to the second point in and about marketing, and I'll come back to the website in a moment. We go out of our way to ensure that our marketing is designed to deliver a spread of visitors across Scotland and a spread of visitors across the various seasons of the year. And we do not put within our digital marketing and within our social channels, for example, marketing of Edinburgh in August. And at those times of year, if you look at what has been put in the public domain, then we ensure that we highlight those other areas of Scotland, in particular what they are going on. And indeed, much of the work, for example, that my colleagues do in relation to events is to ensure that events are supported at different times of year in different locations, and we market those. We are a national tourism organisation. We have to represent all areas of Scotland, but we seek to do that in a way which highlights to visitors the opportunities in other parts of Scotland at other times of year in order to address those pressure points as best as we can. On the specifics of the website, and again, I think this was touched on in the previous session, we strongly encourage businesses and destinations to link to the work that we do both on website and in channels, digital channels, to ensure that their collateral, their messages, their products are made widely available to visitors. So there is always more that can be done in that space. Mark Crothall referenced, the investment that government were able to make in our budgets this year and the desire to see that grow, to continue to secure international visitors. That I think is an important part of how we work, and we will continue to try and strive to make that as effective as possible for all parts of Scotland. It's a day and daily challenge for us.
So you say that you are an all Scotland organisation. I take that at face value. But how would you convince the hoteliers, the business people, the likes of Aberdeen Inspired here in my city, that you are an all Scotland organisation, that you do listen, and that you will adapt if they think that you're not getting it quite right for this northeast corner?
I spent a considerable part of July and August in the northeast of Scotland in relation to golf events, and I wasn't at the Tall Ships, but colleagues were at the Tall Ships. I spoke to councillors from Aberdeen, Aberdeenshire, officials from Aberdeen and Aberdeenshire, and indeed Moray Council as well. I think, as it might have been Mark Crothall in the previous session, I think that they are doing some outstandingly good work at the moment in terms of developing the proposition in the North East and the products in the North East. We have staff who are dedicated to that work in the North East, and we will respond, I hope, immediately and very positively to the work that they are doing in order to amplify the quality of it and to ensure that they get the support from us that is necessary. But I would be disappointed if they didn't feel they were getting that at the moment, but I would be very quick to react if I received that message and told that was the case. I think on the specifics of our marketing that we do, our national position is that for every pound that we invest, there's an £18 return on that investment. That, by any measure, is good in terms of the work that we do with public money.
I may come back to you on some of these points at a later date, Mr Dixon, and I'm sure that some other folk will be very glad of your offer that you've made there. I have one final question, a very brief one. We have talked about the different places where marketing takes place. We heard earlier around about various markets and market changes, the importance of the United States, a move towards Canada. One of the things which has always perturbed me is that I don't think that we necessarily make enough efforts in certain areas, including the likes of Germany. We do get a lot of German tourists. I think we could get a huge amount more. And what we tend to see is folk who come here from Germany tend to come back as well. Do you think that we have got the balance right? I've picked Germany as an example. Do you think we've got the balance right in terms of the targeting of the marketing efforts?
We are active in 17 countries in terms of the way that we use our expertise and try and grow and retain the global profile and market share in. And the priority countries that we have are domestically within the UK, within France and with Germany. And there is further room for growth in those areas. Clearly, US is a high growth market for us as well. And there are opportunities further afield, Australia, Canada, China, etc. Germany is a focus for our international connectivity campaign because we recognise exactly the point that you're making, and the way that we design the marketing that we do is to try and ensure that we target very specifically those countries where we think there is either a propensity to already visit Scotland, clearly America would sit in that, or a demand and interest in the product that we have on offer, and certainly for Germany, France, Holland, Italy, we know that to be the case, and that's why there's a focus on those countries in the work that we're doing.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Dixon. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you. I'd just like to ask a couple of final questions about the technicalities of collection. And in particular, just looking at the proposition in front of Edinburgh, so there's going to be 5% levied, there'll be 20% VAT on top of that. Now, the Council is going to allow accommodation providers to retain 2%, but VAT is still going to have to be charged on top of that. Would it not be better just to charge 3%? And that would actually, and if the key concern of providers is that they're going to have to put their prices up, in a way beyond their control, they would, the council will get the same amount of money if it just charged a 3% levy, and the accommodation providers would actually be able to charge a lower price. Would that not be simpler?
So that's what I meant when I said it's not 2% out of the 5% that they get that they retain. It's 2% out of the total sum that they are due us.
So you need to say that again.
Sorry, so it's not 2 out of the 5% that they're collecting. So it's not a quarter or 20%. My maths is not exceptional. Sorry,
20%. It's 2% of the total amount that they're collecting.
So it's not 20% of what they're collecting. It's 2% of what they're collecting.
Yeah. So it's actually, yeah. So it's a fraction of a percentage. Okay. Can I also ask, just in terms of the percentage collection point, VAT, and this is a point I've made in a private briefing by Edinburgh Council, is a non-trivial tax to collect. There's a lot of verification. In particular, if you look at hotel accommodation, there's a lot of different components, not all of which are accommodation themselves. You know, there are fine dining experiences where the accommodation is actually probably less than half of the total bill paid. What prevents a bed and breakfast provider, for example, saying we don't charge for our accommodation, we just have £100 breakfast that we provide in the morning? And actually, how do you stop that? And actually, more broadly, the verification required to go through and audit the books and make sure that each room rate has had a 5% applied correctly is quite complex, certainly as compared to simply totting up the total number of nights of occupancy you have and then multiplying that by a flat fee. What stops abuse? And actually, how, more importantly, will verification take place? Because it strikes me that's non-trivial.
So our enforcement team are wrestling with these questions exactly as we speak as well. And we're also in engagement with Visit Scotland around communication with industry around, as you say, avoiding the issue of how do we stop bed and breakfast from saying no accommodation, but you pay £100 per breakfast. One of the solutions that I know we've discussed with Visit Scotland and industry as well is something around if the charge is completely voluntary. So could the visitor choose to stay without the breakfast and therefore say, well, I want to stay for free, but I don't want £100 breakfast, in which case you could argue that would be non-leviable. The £0 stay would be non-leviable. So that is one of the discussions that we've had, and I'm not quite sure how this is going to work.
But that's equally problematic for there are a lot of providers out there who absolutely pride themselves on packages that absolutely include overnight accommodation and a fine dining experience. I think, which is absolutely non-optional, but to say that they should be charging an accommodation charge on the whole of that fee would strike me as being quite unfair. I don't. I think in the extremes, yes, you can see where that is, but I think there's a much bigger grey area than might at first be apparent. And it's not just food. I think there's tourism. There might be other leisure facilities. Explaining where the cost. If you're running, a spa, at what point, what proportion of your fee is the accommodation, and what proportion is the other services? And it wouldn't seem to me to be fair to be charging the full amount on the full amount charged to the customer.
I think, Convener, that the legislation is pretty clear on that, which is that we charge the percentage rate based on what the accommodation costs. And I understand your point that it's a non-trivial issue, and as Elin says, we are wrestling with these now. But I don't know about members of this committee, but I have been abroad a fair bit over the years. I have paid a visitor levy in lots of countries. I have never been offered a free stay and a bigger price for a breakfast. My personal experience, broadly, is that industry is compliant with the law and with regulations, that the amount of room for people to play games, you generally don't see that in a responsible, well-regulated industry. Now, if we see in practice issues come forward as the levy is implemented, then we'll have to look at it. But international evidence does not suggest the kind of game playing that you indicate.
I think there's two separate points here. I think the game playing is at the margins, but is definitely a possibility. I'm not saying it's in the main. I think you're right. Most businesses are compliant. But the flip side of the same point is that there will be some businesses that offer a broader experience. And is what you're saying that they just need to charge? If you are, providing a restaurant with rooms, are you saying that they need to be charging the 5% on the total bill?
No, as the legislation says, the 5% should be charged on the accommodation portion. It is up to the business.
So determining that is quite complicated, isn't it?
And most businesses will have a model whereby they have an allocation to each. We know that bed and breakfast businesses are the ones where they do tend to look at it as a totalum. But majority of other businesses, particularly hotels, etc., are already reporting regularly to areas like CoStar on their accommodation-only prices. So it is a recognised model already. We do appreciate that package prices, etc., will make it complicated to identify the specific accommodation portion. And we are willing to work with businesses on understanding how they've arrived at that figure as well. So we've said all along that any enforcement we do will be reasonable and proportionate. We're not there to get businesses as such. We want to work with them to understand, how were you thinking here? You charge £200 for a bed and breakfast package, and you've said £100 of that is the breakfast. What was your thinking around it? And if they can justify that, then that may very well be a valid charge.
Good. Okay. I'll leave my questions there. Thank the panel for their contribution, and I think we now move into private session. Thank you very much.